Lucas Reed thought the hardest part of being a single father was the double shifts and sleepless nights. He was wrong. The hardest part was standing in his bathroom doorway at midnight, staring at a soaking wet stranger who'd broken into his home, while his 5-year-old son slept 30 feet away. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." One decision, one night, one choice that would either save 2 lives or destroy everything he'd built to protect his child. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you what happened when compassion collided with fear on the darkest night of Lucas Reed's life. The rain came down like judgment. Lucas Reed killed the engine of his decade-old Honda Civic and sat in the darkness of his driveway, listening to water hammer the roof in relentless sheets. His hands ached from gripping the steering wheel through 12 hours of deliveries, hot food to warm houses, packages to doorsteps where people waited in dry entryways, never thinking about the driver who sprinted through the downpour to make their convenience possible. 34 years old, single father, 2 jobs that barely covered rent. This was the math of his life now. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see the porch light he'd left on for himself, a small yellow beacon against the storm. Inside that house, his son Ethan was sleeping, safe and warm under blankets Lucas had washed at the laundromat 3 days ago because their dryer had died and he couldn't afford to fix it yet. 5 years old, kindergarten in the morning, a science project about clouds due Friday that they'd barely started. Lucas closed his eyes and counted to 10, a habit he'd developed when the weight got too heavy. 1 breath for each year since Ethan's mother had left. 1 breath for each year he'd learned what it meant to be both father and mother, provider and protector, the only constant in a small boy's universe. When he opened his eyes, the rain hadn't stopped. It never did in Portland. October through May, the sky just leaked, turning the city into a gray watercolor that never quite dried. Lucas had grown up here, knew every mood of the weather, every gradation of cloud and drizzle. But tonight felt different. Tonight the rain felt personal, angry, like the sky itself was trying to wash something away. He grabbed his work bag from the passenger seat, empty now except for receipts and the smell of French fries, and made the sprint to his front door. 20 feet of exposure, 20 feet where the rain found every gap in his jacket, soaked through to his uniform shirt, made his shoes squelch with each step. The key stuck in the lock. Always did when it was wet. Lucas jiggled it with the practiced motion of someone who'd meant to WD-40 the mechanism for 6 months and kept forgetting. The door finally gave, and he stumbled into the small entryway, dripping onto the mat he'd bought at Goodwill specifically for nights like this. Silence greeted him. The good kind. The kind that meant Ethan was asleep, that Mrs. Chen from next door had gotten him fed and bathed and tucked in without incident, that Lucas could afford to breathe for a moment before stepping back into the role that never stopped demanding everything he had. He pulled off his soaked jacket and hung it on the hook by the door, kicked off his shoes, peeled away his socks. The house was cold. He kept the thermostat low to save money, but it was dry, and after 12 hours in the rain, dry felt like luxury. The living room was a museum of careful poverty. Furniture from yard sales and hand-me-downs, arranged with the kind of care that tried to make secondhand look intentional. Ethan's toys in a plastic bin by the couch, organized by size because Lucas had read somewhere that structure helped children feel secure. A bookshelf made from cinder blocks and old boards, filled with library books they'd renew until the librarians knew them by name. Lucas moved through the space quietly, checking the locks on the windows out of habit, adjusting the thermostat up 2 degrees because Ethan sometimes kicked off his blankets at night. In the kitchen, he found the note Mrs. Chen always left. Ethan ate all his dinner, carrots too. Asleep by 8:30. You're a good father, Lucas. Don't forget that. He smiled despite his exhaustion. Mrs. Chen was 72, a widow who'd lived next door for 40 years and appointed herself Ethan's honorary grandmother the week they'd moved in. She refused payment for watching him, accepted only the occasional grocery run or help with her garden. I had 4 children, she'd told him once. I know what it looks like when a parent is doing their best. Lucas folded the note and tucked it into the drawer where he kept all of them. Someday, when Ethan was older, he'd show him the stack. Proof that they hadn't been alone, that kindness had existed in the hard years. The refrigerator hummed its tired song. Inside, milk, eggs, peanut butter, the leftovers of Ethan's dinner that Lucas would eat cold because he was too exhausted to heat them up. He grabbed the container, found a fork, ate standing at the counter in the dark kitchen while rain continued its assault on the windows. Chicken nuggets and carrots. Ketchup that Ethan had applied with the artistic sensibility of a 5-year-old. Lucas chewed mechanically, counting the hours until his morning shift started. 6 hours if he went to bed right now. 5.5 if he allowed himself a shower. He chose the shower. The bathroom was the smallest room in the house, barely enough space for a toilet, sink, and tub, with a curtain that never quite closed all the way. Lucas had scrubbed it clean last Sunday, the way he scrubbed it every Sunday, because this was one area where he refused to let their circumstances show. A clean bathroom meant dignity, meant he was still in control of something. He finished the cold nuggets, rinsed the container, set it in the dish rack to dry. Checked the front door lock one more time, looked in on Ethan, small form curled under dinosaur blankets, breathing the deep, trustful sleep of childhood, and felt the familiar ache of love mixed with terror. Everything he did was for this. Every mile driven, every hour worked, every sacrifice made. Lucas pulled Ethan's door almost closed, leaving it cracked the way his son liked it, and headed for the bathroom. He flipped on the light and froze. A woman stood in his bathtub. For a moment, a long, crystalline moment where time seemed to pause, Lucas's brain refused to process what he was seeing. Then survival instinct kicked in, the primitive response of a father who just realized a stranger was in his home while his child slept. He stepped back, hand reaching for his phone, mouth opening to shout, "Please!" The word came out broken, desperate. "Please don't scream." She was soaking wet, trembling, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Water dripped from her hair, her clothes, pooling at her feet in the tub. Her eyes were wide with fear, but also something else. Recognition. Lucas's hand found his phone, thumb hovering over the emergency dial. His voice came out low, controlled, dangerous. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "I'm sorry." She was crying now, or maybe it was just the rain still streaming from her hair. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go." "You broke into my house." Lucas kept his voice quiet, conscious of Ethan sleeping down the hall. "I'm calling the police." "I know you." The words tumbled out fast, frantic. "From the convenience store 3 weeks ago. You gave me money." Lucas stopped. His thumb still hovered over the dial button, but something in his memory shifted, reached back. 3 weeks ago. The 7-Eleven on Morrison Street. Late night after his delivery shift, stopping for gas and coffee. A woman outside, counting coins with shaking hands, trying to make enough for a sandwich. He'd been exhausted, running on fumes himself, but something about the way she'd counted those pennies with such careful hope. He'd given her a 20, told her to get something hot. She'd looked at him like he'd handed her the world. "You followed me?" The realization came with a fresh spike of fear. "You've been watching my house?" "No, I mean, I saw where you lived that night. I remembered. When everything fell apart, when I had nowhere else, I remembered someone was kind." She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering so violently, her teeth chattered. "Please, one night. I just need one night to figure out what to do." Lucas's mind raced through calculations. His son, 30 feet away. This stranger, dripping wet in his bathroom, claiming desperation. The door. Had she broken it? How had she gotten in? The bathroom window. She followed his gaze to the small window above the toilet, now open a crack. "I'm sorry, I didn't break anything. I was just so cold in the rain." Her voice cracked. "I have nowhere else." "So you broke into a stranger's house?" Lucas kept the phone ready, his body positioned between her and the hallway that led to Ethan's room. "Do you understand how insane that sounds? How dangerous?" "I know." Fresh tears, definitely tears this time, spilled down her cheeks. "I know how it looks. But I've been sleeping in doorways for 2 weeks. In parks, under bridges. Tonight the rain was so bad I thought I might actually die from the cold. And I remembered your address. I remembered you were kind." She looked at him with eyes that held too much pain to be faking. "I'm not dangerous. I'm drowning." Lucas stood there, torn between every instinct he'd honed as a father and something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The same impulse that had made him hand a 20 to a stranger counting pennies. The part of him that still believed people deserved help. But this wasn't just him anymore. This was Ethan, asleep and vulnerable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mara." She wiped at her face with a soaked sleeve. "Mara Collins." "Mara." Lucas kept his voice steady, controlled. "I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" She nodded, still trembling. "Are you on drugs?" "No." "Are you armed?" "No." "Is anyone else with you?" "Outside? Waiting?" "No, I'm alone." Her voice broke on the last word. "I'm completely alone." Lucas studied her face, looking for lies, for danger signs, for anything that would tell him this was a threat. What he saw instead was exhaustion, desperation, the kind of broken that couldn't be faked. He thought of Ethan, his beautiful boy who still believed the world was mostly good, because Lucas had worked so hard to make it seem that way. What lesson was this? What did you teach a child about helping people when you were also responsible for keeping them safe? "I should call the police," Lucas said quietly. "I know." Mara didn't argue, didn't plead anymore, just stood there, shivering, waiting for whatever judgment came next. Lucas's thumb hovered over the screen. He thought about what would happen. Police would come. Mara would be arrested for breaking and entering. She'd spend the night in jail, maybe longer. Would go into a system that didn't help people like her, just cycled them through until they disappeared. He thought about the $20 he'd given her, how little it had cost him, how much it had clearly meant. He thought about Ethan, who sometimes asked why people slept on the street, why they didn't have homes, why nobody helped them. "Because it's complicated," Lucas always told him. "Because sometimes helping is hard." But was it? Was it really? Lucas lowered the phone. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice hard enough to cut through her shivering. "You're going to stay in this bathroom. I'm going to get you dry clothes and a towel. You're going to change, and then we're going to talk in the kitchen. You don't go near my son's room. You don't touch anything. You sit where I tell you to sit, and you tell me exactly how you ended up breaking into my house. Understand?" Mara nodded, something like hope flickering in her eyes. "And Mara?" Lucas met her gaze directly. "If you make me regret this, if you do anything that makes me think my son is in danger, I won't call the police. I'll handle it myself. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear." Her voice was steady now, grateful, but not presumptuous. "Thank you." Lucas left her there and moved quickly to his bedroom, his mind already running through contingencies. Ethan's door was still cracked, dinosaur blankets still rising and falling with peaceful breathing. Nothing had changed in his son's world yet. He grabbed sweats and an old t-shirt from his drawer, clothes that had belonged to him when he'd been 20 pounds heavier, back when he'd had time to eat regular meals. Found a towel from the closet, stood in his bedroom for a moment, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Through the walls, he could hear the rain, relentless, unforgiving. He returned to the bathroom, handed the clothes and towel through the cracked door without looking in. 5 minutes, kitchen table. "Thank you." Her voice was muffled by the towel. "Really, thank you." Lucas went to the kitchen and put on coffee, not because he wanted it, but because he needed something to do with his hands, something normal in a situation that had become completely surreal. He checked on Ethan again, still sleeping, still safe, still innocent of the stranger in their home, and returned to the kitchen to wait. The coffee maker gurgled, the rain hammered, and Lucas Reed, 34-year-old single father who barely made rent and counted pennies like prayers, wondered what he'd just invited into his carefully controlled world. Mara emerged 5 minutes later, transformed from drowned rat to something almost human. His clothes hung on her frame. She was smaller than he'd thought, made more of bones than flesh. But she was dry. Her hair, darker now without the rain, hung in damp tangles around a face that was younger than he'd first assumed. Maybe 30, maybe less. Sit. He pointed to the chair farthest from Ethan's room. She sat. Lucas poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of her, took the chair opposite with his back to the hallway, positioned so he could see both her and the route to his son. Talk, he said. Start with why you're homeless. Mara wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, absorbing its warmth. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady, like someone who'd practiced this story in her head but never had anyone to tell it to. I was an executive assistant at Tech Vision Solutions. Downtown office, corner view, salary that made me think I'd finally made it. She stared into the coffee. I was good at my job, really good. Organized my boss's calendar, managed his meetings, handled confidential files. I knew everything about how the company ran. Was? Lucas asked. 6 weeks ago, I was working late. My boss was in Dubai. Time zone difference meant I was handling emails at weird hours. I noticed something strange in an expense report. Money going to vendor accounts I didn't recognize. She looked up at him. I thought it was a mistake, so I dug deeper. The rain shifted outside, briefly intensifying before settling back into its steady rhythm. It wasn't a mistake, Mara continued. It was systematic theft. Millions of dollars over 3 years, filtered through fake vendor accounts, contracts that didn't exist. I found invoices for services never rendered, equipment never delivered. Someone had built an entire shadow operation inside the company's legitimate business. Lucas leaned back, processing. And you reported it. I tried to. Her hands tightened on the mug. I went to my boss first when he got back from Dubai. Professional courtesy, right? He was COO. He needed to know someone was stealing from his company. She laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. Turns out he was the someone. He was stealing from his own company? Him and the CFO, they'd been doing it since the company went public, using their positions to create false accounts, approve fake contracts, then split the money offshore. It was brilliant, really. They were the ones who'd built the financial oversight systems. They knew exactly how to work around them. Lucas thought about the math of that. Millions of dollars. People trusted with protecting a company, using that trust to rob it blind. What did he do when you confronted him? He offered me a cut. Mara's voice went flat. 5% of everything. Enough to set me up for life, he said. All I had to do was forget what I'd seen and help them keep covering tracks. You said no. I said no. She met his eyes. I know that probably sounds stupid. Take the money, right? Get out clean, live well, don't ask questions. But I couldn't. I couldn't be that person. Lucas understood that. He'd made similar choices, smaller stakes, but the same principle. Delivery companies that wanted him to fudge mileage logs, pocket tips that were meant to be shared, small corruptions that added up. So what happened? He fired me that afternoon, made up a cause, said I'd been stealing office supplies, using company resources for personal business. HR had documentation ready to go. I was escorted out by security, boxed up at my desk while coworkers watched. She stared at nothing. I tried to fight it, went to HR directly to the CEO, but my boss had already poisoned the well, made me look like a disgruntled employee making wild accusations. You had evidence, though. The files you found. On the company's server, which I no longer had access to, and when I tried to use what I'd downloaded to my personal drive, they claimed I'd stolen proprietary information, threatened me with legal action if I went public. Mara's voice cracked slightly. They were careful, really careful. Every move calculated to destroy my credibility before I could expose them. Lucas poured more coffee, his mind working through the story's logic. It held together. The details were too specific to be fabricated on the spot. That explains the job, he said. Doesn't explain living on the street. The apartment was next. Mara's hands trembled slightly. I paid month to month because I'd only been in Portland 8 months. When I got fired, I couldn't make rent. I tried to find other work, but my boss made sure my reputation was destroyed. References that painted me as a thief, industry contacts who suddenly wouldn't return calls. I burned through my savings in 3 weeks. No family? Friends? I grew up in foster care, aged out at 18, worked my way through community college, built everything from nothing. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. I had work friends, but those disappeared when the job did. That's how it works, right? You're only as valuable as your last position. Lucas knew that feeling. When he'd become a single father, most of his friendships had evaporated. People didn't know what to do with a man raising a kid alone, couldn't relate to someone whose entire life was dictated by bedtimes and kindergarten schedules. So you ended up on the street. Shelter first, but Portland's shelters are overcrowded. There's a waiting list. I stayed in a women's facility for a week, but you can't keep belongings there, can't stay during the day. I tried to keep looking for work, but it's hard to interview when you smell like a locker room in your clothes or whatever you can carry. She pulled the oversized t-shirt tighter around herself, a gesture of remembered vulnerability. I lost the shelter bed when I missed curfew one night, had a job interview that ran late, got stuck in traffic. By the time I got back, they'd given my spot to someone else. After that, it was parks, doorways. Anywhere I could stay dry and hidden enough that police wouldn't move me along. Lucas thought about his own close calls with poverty. The months after Ethan's mother left when he'd juggled rent and diapers, sometimes choosing one over the other. How thin the line was between making it and losing everything. "You've been on the street for 2 weeks," he said, "but you remembered my address from 3 weeks ago." "I'm good with details. It's what made me good at my job." Mara offered a wan smile. "And you were the first person in a long time who looked at me like I was still human. When you gave me that money, you didn't look away. You didn't pretend I was invisible. You saw me." Lucas remembered now. The way she'd thanked him, the careful dignity and how she'd accepted the money. He'd thought about her on the drive home that night, wondered what her story was, then gotten caught up in Ethan's bedtime routine and forgotten. "So tonight, when the rain got bad, I thought I was going to die." The words came out flat, honest. "I know that sounds dramatic, but I was so cold, and the rain wasn't stopping, and I couldn't find anywhere to shelter. I started walking, not really thinking about where I was going, and I ended up here. I remembered your porch light. I remembered someone being kind." She looked down at her hands wrapped around the coffee mug. "I didn't plan to break in. I was just going to sit on your porch, get out of the rain, but then I saw the bathroom window was cracked, and I thought, just for a few hours, just until the rain stops. I'd be gone before you woke up. You'd never know. But I came home early." "But you came home." Mara met his eyes. "And instead of calling the police immediately, you're sitting here listening to my story. Why?" Lucas had been asking himself the same question. Why was he giving a home invader coffee? Why was he listening instead of protecting? "Because 3 weeks ago, I gave you $20, he said slowly. "And tonight, you broke into my house. But you didn't steal anything. You didn't hurt anyone. You just stood in my bathtub, freezing and terrified, asking for one night." He paused, thinking about how to articulate something he barely understood himself. "My son asks me sometimes why people are homeless, why they don't have help. And I tell him it's complicated. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just that most people look away, and the ones who don't look away don't know what to do, and the ones who know what to do are too scared to do it." "And you're not scared?" Mara asked softly. "I'm terrified." Lucas said it honestly. "I'm a single father with a 5-year-old son, and you're a stranger who broke into my house. Every instinct I have says to protect him first. Ask questions, never. But you are asking questions. Because I need to know if you're a threat." Lucas leaned forward. "So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need the complete truth. Are you dangerous? Is there any reason at all, that having you here puts my son at risk?" Mara held his gaze. "No, I'm not dangerous. I'm just desperate, and I hate that I broke into your home, that I invaded your privacy, that I made you feel unsafe, but I'm not a threat to you or your son. I'm just—" Her voice cracked. "I'm just trying to survive." Lucas studied her face, looking for the lie, the crack in the facade. What he saw was exhaustion so deep it had carved lines around her eyes, a kind of weariness that went beyond physical tiredness into something close to spiritual defeat. He'd seen that look before. In the mirror, during the worst months after he'd become a single father. When Ethan would cry all night and Lucas would stand in the kitchen at 3 a.m., wondering if he was strong enough to do this alone. Someone had helped him then, Mrs. Chen, showing up with casseroles and offers to babysit, the manager at his first delivery job, giving him flexible hours. Small kindnesses that had kept him afloat. Maybe it was time to pay that forward. Okay, Lucas said. Here's the deal. Mara straightened, hope and fear mixing in her expression. You can stay tonight, but there are rules, non-negotiable. He ticked them off on his fingers. 1. You sleep on the couch. I'm keeping my bedroom door open, and if you move from that couch for any reason except the bathroom, I'll know. 2. You don't go near my son. When he wakes up in the morning, you stay out of sight until I figure out how to explain this. 3. Tomorrow we figure out your next step. Shelter placement, social services, whatever. But this is one night, just one. One night, Mara repeated. I understand. And Mara? Lucas's voice went hard. If anything about your story is a lie, if you're running from something that puts us in danger, you tell me now. Because if trouble follows you here, if my son gets caught in whatever you're running from, there won't be forgiveness. There'll just be consequences. I'm not running from anything criminal, Mara said carefully, but... She hesitated, and Lucas felt his stomach drop. But, he prompted, my boss. When I refused to take his offer and threatened to go to authorities anyway, he made it clear that wouldn't be wise. She pulled up the sleeve of her borrowed t-shirt, revealing bruises on her forearm, dark purple, finger-shaped. 2 men came to the shelter one night, told me that people who made accusations they couldn't prove sometimes had accidents, that being homeless was already dangerous. Did I really want to make it more dangerous? Lucas stared at the bruises, feeling ice form in his stomach. You're saying your former boss sent people to threaten you. I'm saying that when you're homeless and you try to report intimidation, police don't exactly rush to help. You're not credible. You're just another crazy person making wild claims. Mara pulled her sleeve back down. I haven't seen them in a week. I think they were just making sure I stayed quiet and scared, which I have been. Until tonight. Until tonight, when I was desperate enough to break into a stranger's house. She smiled sadly. Not exactly the actions of someone playing it safe. Lucas rubbed his face, exhaustion and anxiety mixing into a toxic cocktail. This was more complicated than he'd thought. This wasn't just a homeless woman needing a night out of the rain. This was someone caught in the crossfire of corporate corruption, threatened into silence with nowhere safe to turn. And he just invited her into his home where his son slept. The men who threatened you, Lucas said carefully. Do they know you're here? No one knows I'm here. I barely knew I was coming here until I was already climbing through your window. But they knew you were in Portland, could find you at the shelter. The shelter's public. This is a residential neighborhood. Mara seemed to understand his fear. I'm not being tracked. I'm just being reminded to stay quiet, stay invisible, which is what I've been doing. Lucas wanted to believe that, needed to believe it for Ethan's sake. Okay, he said, though nothing about this felt okay. One night, we figure out the rest in the morning. He stood, moved to the closet where he kept extra blankets, found a pillow that Ethan had rejected because it was too flat, brought them to the couch, and arranged them while Mara watched. There's a deadbolt on the front door, Lucas said. I'm locking it, keeping the key. Windows are locked. The bathroom window you came through, I'm closing it. I understand. And Mara? He looked at her directly. Thank you for being honest about the threats. I know you didn't have to tell me. You're giving me shelter, she said quietly. Least I can do is not get you killed. It was meant as dark humor, but neither of them laughed. Lucas checked on Ethan one more time, still sleeping peacefully, dinosaurs keeping watch, then returned to his own room. He left the door open as promised, positioned himself so he could see the hallway, the living room beyond, the shape of Mara settling onto the couch. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, Lucas lay awake, listening to his house breathe. The sounds were familiar. Old pipes, settling foundation, the hum of the refrigerator. But tonight they felt different. Tonight there was a stranger in his home, carrying secrets and danger in equal measure. He thought about the call he should make. Police, social services, someone official who could take this responsibility off his shoulders. But he also thought about Mara standing in his bathtub, shivering and terrified, asking for one night. about bruises shaped like fingers and men who threatened women for trying to do the right thing, about Ethan's questions about homelessness and Lucas's answers about how it was complicated. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was simple as choosing compassion over fear. Lucas closed his eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. Tomorrow he'd figure out next steps. Tonight he'd trust that sometimes the right thing and the dangerous thing were the same thing, and you just had to be brave enough to see it through. In the living room, Mara pulled the blanket tighter and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain that had nearly killed her and the silence of a home that had saved her. She thought about executive offices and fake vendor accounts, about men who stole millions and threatened anyone who noticed. She thought about the USB drive hidden in a downtown locker, containing copies of everything she'd found. Evidence she'd been too scared to use, too afraid of the consequences. But fear only worked when you had something to lose. And when you'd already lost everything, job, home, dignity, safety, what was left except the truth? Tomorrow, Mara decided. Tomorrow she'd tell Lucas about the evidence, about what it could do if it reached the right people. Tonight, she'd just be grateful for warmth and a roof and a man who'd chosen compassion when it would have been easier to call the police. Outside, the rain hammered on. Inside, two strangers who'd found each other through random chance and desperate need lay awake in the darkness, each carrying secrets that would change everything, neither knowing yet how much courage the morning would demand. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, they'd both found shelter from the storm. Dawn came gray and reluctant, filtered through Portland clouds that refused to break. Lucas woke to the sound of cartoon theme songs drifting from the living room, Ethan's morning routine, as predictable as sunrise. He'd programmed the TV to turn on automatically at 6:30 because his son was an early riser, and Lucas needed those extra minutes of sleep more than he needed silence. But this morning, there would be no extra minutes. Lucas sat up, every muscle protesting 12 hours of delivery driving followed by 3 hours of fitful sleep. He'd spent most of the night listening to the house, tracking movements, making sure Mara stayed where she was supposed to stay. She had. Around 2 a.m., he'd heard her get up for the bathroom, heard the toilet flush, heard her return to the couch. Otherwise, silence. He pulled on jeans and yesterday's shirt, ran a hand through his hair, and steeled himself for the conversation he'd been dreading since midnight. How did you explain a homeless stranger on the couch to a 5-year-old who still believed home was the safest place in the world? Ethan was sprawled on the floor in his dinosaur pajamas, 6 inches from the television, absorbed in animated adventures. He didn't look up when Lucas entered. "Morning, buddy," Lucas said, keeping his voice normal. "Morning, Dad." Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the screen. "Can I have waffles?" "Let me check what we have." Lucas moved to the kitchen, positioning himself where he could see both his son and the couch where Mara was supposed to be. The blanket was folded neatly, the pillow arranged on top. No sign of her. Lucas's heart rate spiked. He moved quickly through the house, checking the bathroom. Empty. His bedroom. Empty. The panic was rising in his chest when he heard the back door open. Mara stepped inside, carrying his trash bin from the side of the house. She'd pulled her still damp hair into a ponytail and wore the same borrowed clothes from last night. When she saw him, she froze. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I heard the garbage truck. Thought I'd bring in your bin." Lucas exhaled, forcing his pulse to slow. "I told you to stay on the couch." "I know, I just..." She gestured helplessly at the trash bin. "I wanted to help somehow." "Dad?" Ethan's voice drifted from the living room. "Who's that?" There it was, the moment Lucas had been dreading. "Just a minute, Ethan." Lucas kept his voice calm. To Mara quietly, "Go to my room. Close the door. Don't come out until I tell you." She nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Lucas heard his bedroom door click shut. He found Ethan standing now, curious, drawn by the unfamiliar voice. Who was that lady? Lucas knelt down to his son's eye level, a technique he'd learned from parenting books at the library. Meet them where they are. Be honest, but age-appropriate. "That's someone who needed help," Lucas said. "She didn't have anywhere safe to sleep last night because of the rain, so I let her stay here." Ethan processed this with the serious expression he used for big concepts. "Like the people we see downtown." "Yeah, buddy, Like them. Is she still here? For a little bit, just until we figure out where she can go next. Lucas smoothed Ethan's perpetually messy hair. But here's the thing, she's a stranger, okay? So the same rules we have about strangers still apply. You don't talk to her unless I'm right there. You don't go anywhere alone with her. Understand? Stranger danger, Ethan recited dutifully. Exactly. Can you be a big boy and help me with this? Ethan nodded, already losing interest now that the mystery was solved. Can I still have waffles? Absolutely. Lucas stood, relief washing through him. 5-year-olds were beautifully simple sometimes. Go wash your hands. While Ethan was in the bathroom, Lucas retrieved Mara from his bedroom. She looked anxious, uncertain where to stand in someone else's home. He knows you're here, Lucas said quietly, but I told him the stranger rules still apply. He's not going to bother you, but you should probably stay out of his way while I get him ready for school. Of course. Mara hesitated. Lucas, thank you for not just kicking me out at dawn. Day's still young, he said, but without real bite. Then, because his mother had raised him with manners even if she hadn't stuck around to see him use them. Have you eaten? Not since yesterday. Sit. I'll make extra waffles. The morning developed into a strange domestic ballet. Lucas made breakfast while Ethan chattered about his upcoming science project, deliberately not looking at the stranger at the kitchen table, but acutely aware of her presence. Mara sat still and quiet, like someone who'd learned to take up minimal space, accepting the plate Lucas set in front of her with whispered thanks. We're doing clouds, Ethan announced, syrup dripping from his fork. I'm supposed to make a model of different cloud types. That's cool, buddy. Lucas poured orange juice, divided it between 3 glasses. We'll work on it this weekend. Can we use cotton balls? We can use whatever you want. Mara ate slowly, carefully, like someone who knew this might be her only meal. Lucas tried not to watch, tried to focus on Ethan's rambling about cumulus and stratus and nimbus, but he was aware of her in the way you're aware of unexploded ordnance, still dangerous, still unknown. After breakfast, the choreography continued. Ethan to the bathroom to brush teeth. Lucas packing lunch while monitoring both his son and their guest. Mara clearing dishes without being asked, moving quietly around the kitchen like a ghost trying not to haunt. I'm ready! Ethan emerged with his backpack, dinosaurs marching across the fabric. Lucas knelt again, checked that his son had everything he needed. Homework folder, lunchbox, jacket, because Portland mornings were cold even when they weren't raining. Mrs. Chen is picking you up after school, okay? I'll be home by 6. Can we work on clouds when you get home? We'll see. It depends on my schedule. Lucas hugged him, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and syrup. Love you, buddy. Love you too, Dad. Ethan headed for the door, then paused, looking back at Mara. I hope you find somewhere to live. The simple kindness of it, delivered without guile or agenda, hit Lucas in the chest. Mara's eyes filled with tears. She blinked away quickly. Thank you, she managed. That's very kind. Then Ethan was gone, running to meet the school bus at the corner, and Lucas was alone with a stranger in his house, and no 5-year-old buffer between them. He closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and faced Mara across the small kitchen. Okay, he said. Now we figure out what happens next. Mara nodded, wiping at her eyes. I should go. You've already done more than anyone could expect. Where would you go? I don't know, but that's not your problem. Lucas poured himself another cup of coffee, considering. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to give her bus fare and directions to the nearest shelter. Wish her luck. Lock the door behind her. Return to his carefully controlled life where the only person he was responsible for was Ethan. But he thought about those bruises on her wrist. About men who threatened women for trying to expose theft. About systems that protected the powerful and abandoned everyone else. Tell me more about the evidence, he said. Mara looked up, surprised. What? Last night you said your boss was stealing millions, that you found proof. Lucas leaned against the counter. Tell me more about that. Why? Because if what you're saying is true, if you actually have evidence of major corporate fraud, that's not something you can just walk away from. I tried not walking away from it. You see where that got me? Mara gestured at herself, at the borrowed clothes and homeless reality. You tried alone. against people with power and resources who could destroy your credibility. Lucas set down his coffee. But what if you weren't alone? Lucas, you have a son, a life. You can't get involved in this. Maybe I already am involved. You're in my house. If those men who threatened you figure out where you are, they won't. I've been careful. Have you? Lucas challenged. Because you broke into my house last night. That's not exactly covert operations. Mara flinched. You're right. I should go. That's not what I'm saying. Lucas struggled to articulate what he was barely forming in his own mind. I'm saying that you can't run forever. And if what you saw is real, if there's actually evidence, maybe it's time to stop being scared and start fighting back. Easy to say when you're not the one who got death threats. You're right. It is easy for me to say, Lucas acknowledged. But I'm also the one who gave you shelter when you had nowhere else to go. So maybe extend me the courtesy of explaining what we're actually dealing with. Mara studied him for a long moment, weighing trust against risk. Finally, she spoke. I made copies. Before they fired me, before I lost access to everything, I downloaded files to a USB drive, expense reports, internal emails, bank transfer records, everything I could find that showed the pattern. And where is this drive now? In a storage locker downtown, one of those 24-hour facilities where you can rent a unit with cash, no questions asked. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I paid for 3 months up front, back when I still had money. It's good through next week. Lucas did the math. So you've got a week before you lose access to the only proof you have. Proof I can't use. The minute I try to show it to anyone official, my former boss will destroy me legally. He's already laid the groundwork, made me look like a thief and a liar. If I show up with stolen company files, he'll have me arrested. Unless you don't show up alone, Lucas was thinking now, puzzle pieces clicking together. Unless you come with someone credible, someone who can vouch for you. Who? I don't have anyone. You have me. Mara laughed, but it was brittle. No offense, but you're a delivery driver. What credibility do you bring? Lucas felt the sting of that, even though she was right. None professionally, but I have something else. I have someone I trust who might be able to help. Who? A friend from high school, David Park. He's a detective with Portland PD now. Lucas pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't called in months. We used to play basketball together. Lost touch after Ethan was born, but he reached out last year when I needed a reference for a rental application. Told me if I ever needed anything to call. A cop. Mara's voice went flat. I tried going to the police. They didn't believe me. You went as a fired employee with wild accusations. What if you went as a whistleblower with evidence, backed by someone who knows you're telling the truth? You don't know I'm telling the truth. You know I told you a story. No, Lucas said quietly. I know you broke into my house because you were desperate. I know you have bruises that match your story. I know you've been living on the street for 2 weeks rather than taking whatever deal your boss offered you. People who are lying usually take the easy money. Mara shook her head. You're risking too much. If this goes wrong, we're in the exact same place we are now. You're homeless and running. I'm going about my life pretending I never met you. But if it goes right? Lucas met her eyes. If it goes right, you get your life back. And some very bad people face consequences for what they did. And you get what? A clear conscience. I get to tell my son that when someone needed help, I didn't look away. Lucas said it simply. That when doing the right thing was hard and scary, I did it anyway. The silence stretched between them, filled with the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant sound of traffic outside. I need to see the evidence first, Lucas finally said. Before I call David, before we do anything, I need to know this is real. Mara nodded slowly. The storage facility is on Morrison Street, near the river. I know the one. Lucas checked his phone. I've got 4 hours before my afternoon shift starts. Let's go. Now? You got somewhere else to be? Despite everything, Mara smiled. Fair point. 20 minutes later, they were in Lucas's Honda Civic, heading downtown through morning traffic. Mara sat in the passenger seat wearing the same borrowed clothes, her damp hair finally starting to dry. Lucas drove in silence, second-guessing every decision that had led to this moment. This was insane. He had a son to protect, bills to pay, a life that functioned only because he kept it simple and controlled. Getting involved in corporate fraud investigations was the opposite of simple, but he thought about Ethan's words this morning. I hope you find somewhere to live. The easy compassion of a child who hadn't learned yet to look away from suffering. What kind of father would Lucas be if he taught his son to care, but didn't model it himself? The storage facility was a squat concrete building near the waterfront, the kind of place that catered to transient populations and people with things to hide. Lucas parked in the nearly empty lot. Unit 237, Mara said, second floor. They climbed exterior stairs slick with morning dew. Mara led him to a unit the size of a closet, secured with a combination lock. Her hands shook slightly as she entered the code. The door swung open, revealing a space that held the remnants of Mara's previous life. A suitcase, a box of professional clothes, a framed photo of her receiving some kind of award, smiling in a conference room with people who'd later betray her. And sitting on top of the suitcase, a simple black USB drive. Mara picked it up, held it like it might explode. Everything's on here. 3 years of systematic theft, documented in their own emails and financial records. Can I see? She hesitated, then handed it over. You have a laptop? In the car. Back in the Civic, Lucas booted up the old laptop he kept for route planning and mileage logs. Mara inserted the drive, pulled up a folder structure that was meticulously organized. Here. She opened a spreadsheet. This shows every fake vendor account they created. Company name, federal ID number, bank routing information. All of it fabricated. Lucas scanned the numbers. Even with his limited financial knowledge, the pattern was clear. Invoices that followed predictable patterns, amounts calculated to stay just under automatic review thresholds, payments dispersed across multiple accounts. And this, Mara opened an email chain. My boss discussing the scheme with the CFO. They're not even being subtle. They thought these emails were secure. Lucas read the exchange, his stomach turning. Casual discussion of millions in theft, jokes about how easy it was to fool the board, contempt for employees who actually worked for their money. How much total? By my calculation, $18 million over 3 years. Mara pulled up another file. They had it all planned. Take the money, retire early, let the company collapse, and blame it on market conditions. Lucas sat back, processing. This wasn't exaggeration. This was real documented corporate theft on a massive scale. Why haven't you gone to the FBI? He asked. This is federal fraud. Because I'm nobody. A fired employee with an axe to grind. Mara's voice was tired. They'd look at me, look at my former boss with his lawyers and his credibility, and decide I'm just bitter about getting fired. Not if you have someone who believes you. You're a delivery driver, Lucas, not a federal agent. No. But David is law enforcement, and he can connect us to people who handle this kind of case. Lucas pulled out his phone. Let me call him. Now? Before I lose my nerve. He dialed before he could second-guess himself. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Lucas Reed, been a while, man. Hey, David. Lucas tried to sound casual, aware of Mara watching him. You got a minute? I need some advice. Sure. What's up? I've got a situation. Woman I know has evidence of major corporate fraud. 18 million stolen from a tech company. She tried reporting it, got fired, and threatened. Now she's got documentation, but no one will listen. A pause. Lucas, what are you into? Nothing illegal. I'm just trying to help someone who needs it. How well do you know this woman? Lucas looked at Mara, thought about her in his bathtub last night, about bruises and broken trust. Well enough to believe her. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, I can't promise anything, but I know someone in the white-collar crime unit. If the evidence is legit, they'll take it seriously. But Lucas, yeah? Be careful. If what you're saying is true, these people have already shown they're willing to threaten witnesses. Don't make yourself a target. Too late for that, Lucas said quietly. When can your contact meet? Let me make a call. I'll get back to you within the hour. Lucas hung up, looked at Mara. He's going to try. She nodded, something like hope flickering in her expression. Thank you. They sat in the car waiting, watching morning fog burn off the Willamette River. Lucas thought about Ethan at school, learning about clouds, unaware that his father was sitting in a parking lot with evidence of massive fraud and a stranger who'd invaded their lives through a bathroom window. His phone rang 40 minutes later. "Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI's Portland field office," David said without preamble. "She handles corporate fraud. I told her the basics. She's willing to meet, but she wants to see the evidence first. Verify it's worth pursuing before they commit resources." "When?" "Can you do 1 p.m. today? Federal building downtown." Lucas checked the time. That would make him late for his delivery shift, might cost him hours he couldn't afford to lose, but some things mattered more than money. "We'll be there," he said. "Lucas?" David's voice carried warning. "Be straight with me. Is this woman legit?" "I think so." "You think so, or you know so?" Lucas looked at Mara, exhausted, hopeful, terrified. He thought about her story, about the evidence on the drive, about bruises that told their own truth. "I know so," he said. "Okay, I'll text you the details. And Lucas? Watch your back." Lucas pocketed his phone, turned to Mara. "We've got 3 hours to prepare. The FBI is going to have questions. They're going to want to verify everything. You need to be ready." "I've been ready for weeks. Just nobody would listen." "Someone's listening now." Lucas started the car. "Let's make sure they hear the truth." They spent the next 2 hours at a coffee shop near the federal building, reviewing documents, organizing evidence, building a timeline. Mara knew the details intimately. She'd lived with this knowledge for weeks, but articulating it clearly, anticipating questions, preparing for skepticism was different. Lucas helped where he could, asking the questions a detective might ask, poking holes to prepare her for resistance. It felt surreal, him in his delivery uniform and her in borrowed clothes, preparing to expose millions in corporate theft over $3 coffee. At 12:45, they walked to the federal building. Security, metal detectors, the sterile efficiency of government spaces. An agent met them in the lobby. Agent Chen, exactly as professional as Lucas had imagined. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed, carrying a folder that suggested she'd already done preliminary research. "Miss Collins, Mr. Reed." She shook their hands. "Let's talk upstairs." The interview room was windowless and anonymous. Agent Chen sat across from them, pulled out a recorder, and got straight to business. "Miss Collins, I understand you believe you have evidence of corporate fraud at Tech Vision Solutions." "Not believe?" "No." Mara's voice was steady. "I have documentation of $18 million stolen over 3 years through fake vendor accounts." "Walk me through it." For the next 90 minutes, Mara laid it out. The discovery, the confrontation, the threats. Agent Chen listened without interruption, taking notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When Mara finished, the agent turned to Lucas. "Mr. Reed, what's your connection to this?" "I met Mara 3 weeks ago, helped her when she was homeless." Lucas kept it simple. "When she told me what happened, I believed her, thought she deserved someone to listen." "So you have no professional expertise in financial fraud investigation?" "None. I drive for a delivery service." Agent Chen made a note. "But you arranged this meeting through Detective Park." "David's an old friend. I trust him, he trusts me. Seemed like the right move." The agent studied them both, clearly assessing credibility. Finally, she spoke. "The evidence you've provided is preliminary but compelling. If it checks out, we're looking at multiple federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, possibly RICO violations." She paused. "But I need to be clear about what happens next. This becomes a federal investigation. You'll both need to give formal statements, possibly testify. If Mr. Burton and his associates realize you're cooperating—" "They already threatened me," Mara interrupted. "Already destroyed my life. What more can they do?" "Quite a lot, actually." Agent Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "Federal witnesses in fraud cases have been subjected to intimidation, harassment, even violence. We can offer some protection, but it's not perfect." Lucas felt ice form in his stomach. "My son will be considered in any threat assessment. But Mr. Reed, once you're involved in a federal investigation, you can't uninvolve yourself. You need to understand the risk." Lucas thought about Ethan's science project, about waffles and school buses, and the carefully normal life he'd built. about how one decision to help a stranger could cascade into danger he'd never imagined. But he also thought about $18 million stolen while working people struggled, about men who threatened women into silence, about the kind of world he wanted his son to grow up in. "What do you need from us?" he asked. Agent Chen nodded as if he'd passed some test. "Full cooperation, formal statements, access to all evidence. And Ms. Collins, you'll need to stay available. Possibly relocate temporarily for your safety." "I'm homeless," Mara said flatly. "Relocation isn't exactly complicated. We can arrange temporary housing, safe accommodation while we build the case." Agent Chen pulled out forms. "But I need commitment from both of you. This isn't something you start and walk away from." Lucas looked at Mara, saw the question in her eyes. He thought about the easy path: stand up, walk out, return to his simple life. Let someone else fight this battle. But simplicity came at a cost, and sometimes the cost was looking away when you should be paying attention. "I'm in," he said. Mara took a shaky breath. "Me too." "Okay." Agent Chen smiled for the first time. "Let's bring down some very bad people." They spent another hour giving preliminary statements, signing forms, establishing contact protocols. By the time they left the federal building, it was after 3 p.m. and Lucas was definitely late for his shift. He called his supervisor from the car, explained a family emergency, took the hit to his hours. Some things mattered more than perfect attendance. "What now?" Mara asked as they drove back toward his neighborhood. "Now I pick up Ethan from Mrs. Chen's. Make him dinner, help with homework." Lucas navigated traffic on autopilot and figure out how to explain to a 5-year-old why our lives just got a lot more complicated. "You don't have to keep helping me. The FBI will arrange housing. In a few days, maybe. Meanwhile, where are you sleeping tonight?" Mara was quiet. "That's what I thought." Lucas pulled onto his street. "You'll stay at my place until they get you set up. But Mara, same rules as last night. You stay out of Ethan's way, you don't take risks, you tell me if anything feels wrong. Lucas, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking, I'm offering." He parked in his driveway, killed the engine. "We're in this now. Might as well see it through together." Mrs. Chen's house smelled like jasmine tea and fresh-baked cookies. Ethan was at her kitchen table, cotton balls and construction paper scattered around him, already started on his cloud project without waiting. "Dad!" He ran over, hugging Lucas's legs. "Look, I made Cumulus." "That's great, buddy." Lucas ruffled his hair, looked at Mrs. Chen. "Thank you for picking him up." "Always happy to help." The old woman's eyes flicked to Mara, waiting in the car. "Your guest is still here?" "For a few more days. It's complicated." Mrs. Chen studied him with the penetrating gaze of someone who'd raised 4 children and knew when someone was in over their head. "Be careful, Lucas. You have a good heart, but good hearts can get broken." "I know." Lucas gathered Ethan's things. "I'm being as careful as I can." That night, after Ethan was asleep and Mara was settled on the couch, Lucas stood in his kitchen and let himself feel the full weight of what he'd started. He'd gone from simple delivery driver to federal witness in less than 24 hours. Had invited danger into his home because a stranger asked for help. His phone buzzed. A text from Agent Chen. "Initial verification of evidence looks solid. Expect contact within 48 hours about next steps. Stay vigilant, like he had a choice." Lucas looked through the doorway at Mara, already asleep from exhaustion and relief. Then down the hall at Ethan's room, where dinosaurs stood guard over dreams. He'd made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. Outside, the Portland night settled in cool and damp. And somewhere across the city, powerful men who'd stolen millions had no idea that their carefully constructed fraud was about to collapse around them. The storm was coming. Lucas just hoped he was strong enough to weather it. The consequences arrived faster than Lucas expected. 2 days after their meeting with Agent Chen, Lucas was loading packages into his Civic at the distribution center when his phone rang. Unknown number, Portland area code. He almost didn't answer, probably spam, probably someone trying to sell him car insurance he couldn't afford, but something made him swipe to accept. "Mr. Reed?" A voice he didn't recognize. Male, professional, carrying the kind of authority that made Lucas's spine straighten automatically. "This is James Burton. I believe you've been spending time with a former employee of mine." Lucas's blood went cold. He looked around the parking lot, suddenly aware of every car, every shadow. "How did you get this number?" "It's not difficult to find people, Mr. Reed, especially when they start making trouble." Burton's tone was conversational, almost friendly. "I understand you've been helping Mara Collins. That's admirable. But I think you should know what kind of person you're dealing with." "I know exactly what kind of person she is." Lucas kept his voice steady, though his heart was hammering. "And I know what kind of person you are, too." A soft laugh. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're a single father working 2 jobs to make rent. That's a vulnerable position, Mr. Reed. Wouldn't want anything to jeopardize your ability to provide for your son." The threat was delivered with silk-wrapped steel. Lucas felt rage and fear collide in his chest. "Are you threatening my child?" "I'm simply observing that you have responsibilities, people depending on you. It would be unfortunate if those obligations became more difficult because you chose to involve yourself in matters that don't concern you." Burton paused. "Mara is troubled, Mr. Reed. She made serious accusations she couldn't prove, stole confidential company information, and when confronted became irrational. We tried to help her. She rejected that help." "By help, you mean buying her silence." "I mean offering her a generous severance in exchange for a standard non-disclosure agreement. She chose to interpret kindness as conspiracy." Burton's voice hardened slightly. "But you still have choices. You can distance yourself from this situation. Encourage Ms. Collins to accept the help we're offering, and everyone walks away whole. Or you continue down this path and discover that good intentions don't protect you from consequences. Your employer, for instance. Do they know you've been using company time for personal matters? That call you made to Portland PD during your shift? That could be grounds for termination." Lucas's grip tightened on his phone. "You've been watching me. I'm protecting my interests as any businessman would." Burton's tone shifted, becoming almost paternal. "I'm not a monster, Mr. Reed. I understand you thought you were helping someone in need. But you're in over your head. Mara's problems are complex and they're not yours to solve. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a conversation with her. Explain that her best option is to accept our offer and move forward with her life. And you're going to step away from whatever misguided crusade you think you're on. And if I don't, then I'll be disappointed. And disappointment tends to have consequences." Burton let that hang in the air. "You have a lovely son, Mr. Reed. Ethan, isn't it? 5 years old, kindergarten, at Bridgeport Elementary? I'd hate to see his life disrupted because his father made poor choices." The rage Lucas felt was white-hot and primal. "Stay away from my son." "I'm nowhere near your son. I'm simply aware of him, as I'm aware of Mrs. Chen next door, sweet woman, 72, lives on a fixed income. It would be tragic if something threatened her financial stability. If, say, someone filed complaints about unlicensed childcare happening in her home." Lucas understood then what he was dealing with. Not just a thief, but someone who'd weaponize an old woman's kindness to make a point. "You're a real piece of work," Lucas said quietly. "I'm a pragmatist, and right now the pragmatic thing is for you to convince Ms. Collins to take our offer and for you to forget any of this happened." Burton's voice became brisk, businesslike. "You have 48 hours. After that, I can't guarantee what happens next will be pleasant." The line went dead. Lucas stood in the parking lot, phone gripped so tight his knuckles were white. Around him, other drivers loaded packages, complained about routes, lived their normal lives. Nobody knew that in the last 3 minutes, everything had changed. He called Agent Chen immediately. "Burton just called me, made threats against my son, against my neighbor. He knows where Ethan goes to school." Lucas was pacing now, unable to stand still. How does he know these things? Because he has resources and no scruples. Agent Chen's voice was calm but serious. Did he make specific threats? He implied consequences if I don't convince Mara to take whatever deal he's offering. Mention my employer, my neighbor, my son's school. Lucas felt his hands shaking. This is exactly what I was afraid of. "Mr. Reed, listen to me carefully. This is intimidation. It's what they do when they're scared. The fact that he called you means we're getting close to something real. He threatened my 5-year-old. He implied potential problems. That's different from a direct threat, legally. Agent Chen sighed. I know that's not comforting, but it's important you understand what we're dealing with. These men are sophisticated. They know how to threaten without crossing legal lines. So what do I do? You document everything. Save the call if it's in your history. Write down exactly what was said while it's fresh. And you trust the process. The process doesn't protect Ethan. No, but we can. I'm going to arrange increased patrol near your home and your son's school. Plain clothes, nothing obvious. If Burton or his people make any move, we'll know. Lucas wanted to believe that was enough, but he'd seen too many movies, read too many news stories about witnesses who trusted the system and ended up dead. What about Mara? Should I tell her? Absolutely. She needs to know the pressure is escalating. Agent Chen paused. Mr. Reed, I want you to understand something. What you're doing, standing up to these people despite the risk, it matters. Most witnesses fold when threatened. The fact that you're still here means we have a real chance at justice. Justice doesn't mean much if something happens to my son. Nothing is going to happen to your son. I promise you that. Agent Chen's voice carried absolute conviction. But I need you to hold on a little longer. We're moving fast on the investigation. Within a week, we'll have enough to bring charges. Once that happens, Burton's power evaporates. A week is a long time when someone's threatening your family. I know, but it's all we've got. A pause. Do you trust me, Mr. Reed? Lucas thought about that. Trust. Such a small word for such a massive leap of faith. I'm still here, aren't I? He said finally. Yes, you are. Which makes you braver than most. Agent Chen's tone softened. Go home. Be with your son. Stay alert, but don't panic. We've got eyes on you. Lucas drove home in a daze, checking his mirrors obsessively, seeing threats in every car that followed too long. When he pulled into his driveway, Mrs. Chen was outside watering her garden. She waved, oblivious to the danger Lucas had brought to her doorstep. Inside, Mara was washing dishes, while Ethan built elaborate structures with blocks on the living room floor. The domestic normalcy of it felt surreal against the backdrop of Burton's threats. Ethan, buddy, can you play in your room for a bit? Lucas tried to keep his voice light. I need to talk to Mara about grown-up stuff. Can I bring my blocks? Sure. Build me something awesome. Once Ethan was safely occupied, Lucas turned to Mara. She took one look at his face and knew. What happened? He told her about Burton's call, watched her face drain of color as he repeated the threats, the implications, the 48-hour deadline. I need to leave. Mara was already moving, looking for her few belongings. Right now. If I disappear, he'll have no reason to target you. And go where? Back to the streets? Lucas caught her arm. That's what he wants, to isolate you, make you vulnerable. Better me vulnerable than your son in danger. Mara's eyes were fierce with self-recrimination. I never should have come here, never should have dragged you into this. Too late for that. We're already in it. Then get out. Tell Burton you convinced me to take his deal. Let me disappear and you go back to your life. Lucas wanted to take that option. Every paternal instinct screamed at him to protect Ethan first, worry about justice later. But he thought about Agent Chen's words. Most witnesses fold, and he thought about $18 million stolen while working people struggled. No, he said quietly. Lucas, no. We're not running. We're not giving in. He met her eyes. Burton called because he's scared. Because the FBI is closing in and he knows his time is running out. So he's trying to break us before we break him. He threatened Ethan. He implied problems. There's a difference. Lucas was trying to convince himself as much as her. And Agent Chen is putting protection in place. Patrols near the school, surveillance on the house. We're not alone in this. You're risking everything for someone you barely know. I'm risking everything for what's right. There's a difference. Lucas sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting him like a wave. Besides, you're not someone I barely know anymore. You've been living in my house for 3 days. You've met my son. Mrs. Chen thinks you're my girlfriend. Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. She asked me yesterday if we were serious. What did you tell her? That it was complicated. Mara sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. which is the most honest thing I've said in weeks. They sat in silence, listening to Ethan's voice drifting from his room as he narrated an epic battle between dinosaurs and space aliens. 5 years old, and his biggest worry was whether the T-Rex could defeat the flying saucer. "I don't want to destroy his innocence," Lucas said quietly. "That's my job as a father, to keep the world's ugliness away from him as long as possible." "But it's also your job to teach him courage," Mara replied. To show him what it looks like when someone stands up for what's right, even when it's hard. Showing him and risking him are different things. Are they? Mara turned to face him. Because from where I'm sitting, you've already shown him compassion. You took in a stranger who broke into your house. You believed her story when you had every reason not to. You're fighting to expose corruption because it's the right thing to do. What better lesson could you teach him? Lucas wanted to argue, but she had a point. He thought about the man he wanted Ethan to become. Strong, yes. Safe, absolutely. But also kind, brave. Someone who didn't look away when others needed help. The kind of man Lucas was trying to be right now. His phone buzzed. A text from Agent Chen. "Document everything from the call. We're tracking Burton's movements. Stay alert." Another text, this one from David Park. "Heard about the threat. I'm off duty, but I'll swing by your place tonight. Extra eyes can't hurt. Extra eyes." Lucas showed Mara the messages. "We've got people watching our backs. For now." "But Lucas, these men, they're patient. They'll wait until the heat dies down, until people stop paying attention, and then they'll be in federal prison." Lucas said it with more confidence than he felt. "Agent Chen says they're moving fast. Within a week, charges will be filed." A week is a long time. "Then we make it through one day at a time." Lucas stood, checked on Ethan through the doorway, still building, still innocent. "Today we survived, tomorrow we do it again, and the day after that we do it again, until Burton and his people are in handcuffs." Mara studied him, something shifting in her expression. "You really believe we can win this?" "I have to, because the alternative is teaching my son that powerful people always get away with it, that doing the right thing doesn't matter." Lucas met her eyes. "And I won't accept that. Not for him. Not for me." The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Lucas checked the window, David Park's unmarked car in the driveway. He opened the door to find his old friend in jeans and a Blazers hoodie, off-duty casual but with a detective's watchful eyes. "Thought I'd drop by," David said. "Maybe hang out for a bit. Watch the game." Lucas understood. Extra security disguised as a social call. "Come in. Want a beer?" "Sure." David entered, nodded at Mara. "Ms. Collins, heard you've had an interesting few days." That's one word for it. Mara stood awkwardly, uncertain where she belonged in this dynamic. "Relax, I'm off the clock." David settled on the couch, accepted the beer Lucas handed him. "Just a friend checking in, making sure my buddy's okay." They talked basketball and weather, surface conversation that barely masked the underlying tension. Ethan emerged from his room, delighted to have a visitor, and showed David his block construction with the proud enthusiasm of a 5-year-old who'd built something epic. "That's amazing, buddy," David said seriously. "Is that a fortress?" "It's a cloud castle for my science project," Ethan beamed. "See, cumulus clouds are fluffy, so I made it fluffy with the blocks." "I see that, very scientific." Lucas watched his son interact with David, saw the normalcy of it, and felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. This was what Burton was threatening. Not just Lucas's safety, but moments like this. Ethan's joy in sharing his project. The simple pleasure of friends and family. Burton had no idea what he was up against. After Ethan's bedtime, extended slightly because he was excited about his visitor, David got serious. "Agent Chen briefed me on Burton's call. Guys got brass threatening a federal witness." David kept his voice low. "But it also means he's desperate. People only make threats when they're cornered." "Doesn't make the threats less scary," Lucas said. "No, but it means you're winning." David leaned forward. "Here's what I know from working fraud cases. These corporate types, they're used to intimidating people through lawyers and money. Direct threats. That's amateur hour. It means their sophisticated tactics aren't working." "So what do we do?" "You stay visible, Keep routines normal. Don't act scared. Don't change patterns in ways that suggest you're rattled. David glanced at Mara. Burton wants you isolated and afraid. Don't give him that satisfaction. He mentioned Mrs. Chen, said he could make trouble for her. Let me handle that. David pulled out his phone. I'll have a conversation with her tomorrow. Nothing official, just making sure she knows to report anything unusual. And I'll coordinate with patrol to keep extra eyes on the block. I don't want her scared. She won't be. I'm good at these conversations. David stood, stretched. I should get going, but Lucas, you did the right thing here. Not many people would. Sometimes I wonder about that. Don't. The world needs more people who choose courage over convenience. David clapped him on the shoulder. You're going to get through this. And when it's over, Burton and his buddies will be in federal custody, and you'll be able to tell Ethan you helped make that happen. After David left, Lucas locked the doors and checked the windows. Mara was already settling onto the couch, her nightly routine established now. 3 days and they'd developed patterns, habits of proximity that felt both strange and natural. Thank you, she said quietly, for not giving up on this. Thank you for trusting me with it. Lucas paused at the hallway entrance. We're going to be okay, Mara. I have to believe that. I'm starting to believe it too. Lucas checked on Ethan one last time, sleeping peacefully, dinosaurs keeping watch, and returned to his room. Through the open door, he could see Mara on the couch, a silhouette in the darkness. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Lucas's heart rate spiked before he recognized it as Agent Chen using a different line, making progress on the case. Found additional evidence in bank records that corroborates everything Mara provided. This is solid, Mr. Reed. Hold tight. Lucas typed back. How much longer? Days, not weeks. I promise. He set the phone aside and lay in the darkness, listening to his house settle. Somewhere out there, Burton was probably making more calls, applying more pressure, trying to maintain control of a situation that was slipping through his fingers. But here, in this small house with its second-hand furniture and careful budget, Lucas Reed was holding the line, protecting a stranger who'd become something more, teaching his son through actions instead of words what courage looked like. The next morning arrived without incident. Lucas went through his routine. Breakfast with Ethan, walked to the bus stop, watching until his son was safely aboard. But now he scanned the street for unfamiliar cars, memorized license plates, kept his phone ready. You're doing great, Mara said when he returned. She'd started making coffee in the mornings, small gestures of contribution. I know this isn't easy. None of this is easy, but it's what we're doing. Lucas accepted the coffee gratefully. Agent Chen texted last night, said they're close. How close? Days, not weeks. Mara closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her face. Days, we can do days. We can do whatever we have to do. Lucas's phone rang, his supervisor. He answered with a sense of dread. Reed, we need to talk about your recent attendance. The voice was clipped, professional. You've missed shifts, left early, made personal calls on company time. This isn't like you. Lucas felt Burton's invisible hand in this. I've had some personal issues come up, family emergency. I understand that, but we have standards. I'm going to need to put you on notice. Any more incidents and we'll have to let you go. I understand. Lucas kept his voice level even as anger burned in his chest. It won't happen again. He hung up and looked at Mara. Burton's hitting me at work now. I'm so sorry. Not your fault. He's just showing us what he's capable of. Lucas poured more coffee, hand steady despite the fury coursing through him. But here's what he doesn't understand. I've been poor, I've struggled, I've lived on the edge of financial disaster before. His threats to my job? That's just Tuesday for people like me. But Ethan will be fine, because I've built a life where we can survive setbacks. We've done it before. Lucas met her eyes. Burton thinks taking away my job will break me, but I've been broken before. I know how to put the pieces back together. The defiance in his voice surprised him. Maybe Burton had miscalculated. Maybe threatening someone who'd already survived rock bottom wasn't the smart play. That afternoon, while Lucas was on his delivery route, Agent Chen called. We've got him, she said without preamble. Burton made a mistake. He called you from his personal cell, and we've been monitoring his communications since you filed your complaint. The threat to your son? That's witness intimidation, federal crime. We can move now." Lucas pulled over, hand shaking with adrenaline. "What does that mean?" "It means warrants are being issued as we speak. Burton, the CFO, 3 other executives involved in the fraud. By end of business today, they'll all be in custody." Agent Chen's voice carried satisfaction. "You did it, Mr. Reed. You and Ms. Collins, you stood up and you won." Lucas couldn't speak for a moment. Weeks of tension, days of fear, all releasing at once. "What happens next?" he finally managed. "Arrests, arraignment, trial preparation. You'll both need to give depositions, possibly testify, but the immediate danger is over. Burton won't be making any more threats from a federal holding cell." "And Mara? She's safe?" "She's safe. We'll still arrange temporary housing until trial, but the active threat is neutralized." Agent Chen paused. "You should be proud. Not many people have the courage to see something like this through." Lucas thought about Ethan, about the lessons he was teaching without meaning to, about standing up even when you're scared, about doing the right thing even when it costs you. "I just did what anyone should do," he said. "But most don't. That's what makes it matter." Lucas finished his shift in a daze, barely registering the addresses, the packages, the routine. His mind was on getting home, telling Mara, figuring out what came next. When he walked through the door at 6 p.m., Mara took one look at his face and knew. "They got him," Lucas said simply. She sank onto the couch, hands covering her face. Not crying, just processing. Weeks of running, of fear, of carrying evidence she couldn't use, all of it ending in a moment. "It's over?" Her voice was muffled. "The arrest part is, there's still trial, still depositions, but Burton's in custody. He can't hurt you anymore." Mara looked up, and there were tears now, but they were relief more than pain. "I didn't think this would actually work. I thought he'd find a way to win." "He did find a way. He threatened a 5-year-old and committed federal witness intimidation." Lucas sat beside her. "Turns out that's a losing strategy." Ethan burst through the door then, back from Mrs. Chen's, chattering about his day. He stopped short when he saw Mara crying. "Are you sad?" he asked with a child's directness. "No, sweetie." Mara wiped her eyes. "I'm happy. Sometimes people cry when they're really, really happy." "Like at weddings," Ethan announced. "Mrs. Chen told me people cry at weddings because they're happy." Exactly like that. Lucas watched his son process this, saw the acceptance in those 5-year-old eyes. This was the world Ethan would inherit. Complex, sometimes scary, but also capable of justice. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas and Mara sat on opposite ends of the couch, exhausted but electric with relief. "What happens now?" Mara asked. "For me, I mean. FBI is arranging housing, temporary until after the trial." Lucas had already thought through the logistics. "But there's no rush. You can stay here until it's set up." "I've already imposed so much." "You haven't imposed anything. You've been through hell and you're still standing." Lucas paused. "And honestly, having you here, it's been good for Ethan. He's learning that helping people matters. He's learning that from you. I'm just the recipient. Maybe. But he sees you too. Sees someone who made hard choices, who stood up even when it was scary." Lucas met her eyes. "That's a valuable lesson." Mara was quiet for a moment. "When this is all over, after the trial, after everything, I want to do something good with this. Maybe work with other whistleblowers. Help people who are trying to expose corruption but don't know how." "That's a great idea." "It's what I should have done from the start. Instead of running, instead of hiding." She smiled sadly. "But I was scared and alone. Until I wasn't anymore." Lucas thought about the trajectory of the past few days. From a stranger in his bathroom to a federal witness in his living room. From terror to triumph. From isolation to alliance. "You were never really alone," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." Outside, Portland settled into its evening rhythm. Rain starting again, gentle this time, washing the city clean. And in a federal holding facility downtown, James Burton sat in a cell, finally facing consequences for the choices he'd made. Justice was slow and imperfect. But sometimes, just sometimes, it worked. And Lucas Reed, single father and delivery driver, had helped make it happen. The arrests made the news within hours. Lucas was making breakfast the next morning when his phone started buzzing with notifications. News alerts, messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years, even a call from a reporter asking for comment. He ignored them all, focused on getting Ethan fed and ready for school while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. "Why is your phone making so much noise?" Ethan asked through a mouthful of cereal. "Just work stuff, buddy. Nothing important." Lucas silenced the notifications, but they kept coming. The story was everywhere. Major tech executives arrested for massive fraud, whistleblower vindicated, 18 million recovered. Some articles mentioned Mara by name. None mentioned Lucas, and he was grateful for that invisibility. Mara emerged from the bathroom looking shell-shocked, her own phone clutched in her hand. "It's everywhere. Every news site, every channel. They're calling me brave." "You are brave," Lucas said simply. "I'm terrified. There are reporters outside the building where my storage unit is. Someone found my old LinkedIn profile and posted it with the articles." She sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "I thought I wanted vindication. Now I just want to disappear." Lucas understood that impulse. The spotlight was harsh and unforgiving, turning private suffering into public spectacle. But he also knew that Mara's story mattered, that people needed to see what happened when you stood up to corruption. "Agent Chen will handle the press," he said. "You don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to talk to. They're going to dig into everything, my past, my mistakes, every detail of my life." Mara's hands shook slightly. "That's what they do, right? Find ways to discredit whistleblowers? Make it about my character instead of what Burton did. Let them dig. You've got nothing to hide except survival." Lucas poured her coffee, added the sugar she liked. "And anyone who criticizes how you survived doesn't understand what it's like to have everything taken from you." Ethan was watching them, picking up on the tension even if he didn't understand its source. Lucas forced himself to smile, to project calm. "Finish your cereal, buddy. Bus comes in 10 minutes. After Ethan left for school, Lucas walking him to the stop, scanning for reporters or cameras, finding nothing. He returned to find Mara staring at her phone with an expression he couldn't read. "What is it?" Tech Vision's board released a statement. They're claiming they had no knowledge of the fraud, that Burton and the CFO acted independently. She showed him the screen. "They're calling me a hero for exposing it, offering me my job back with a promotion and a settlement for wrongful termination." Lucas read the statement, noting the carefully worded language that protected the company while praising Mara. Corporate damage control at its finest. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." Mara set down the phone. "Part of me wants to take it, prove I can go back and succeed, show them they didn't break me." "And the other part?" "The other part never wants to see that building again. Never wants to work for people who let this happen on their watch, who only care now because they got caught." She laughed bitterly. "They're offering me money and a title. What I want is an apology, acknowledgement that they destroyed my life and watched me suffer rather than investigate their own executives." "You'll get neither," Lucas said quietly. "That's not how these things work. They'll throw money at you and call it justice." "I know." Mara stood, paced the small kitchen. "Agent Chen called this morning. The FBI recovered most of the stolen money, 18 million, sitting in offshore accounts. They're working on asset forfeiture to return it to Tech Vision and the defrauded investors." "That's good news." "Is it? Burton and his friends get to steal millions, live well for years, and their only consequence is going to prison. The money gets returned, but what about the people who lost their jobs when the company cut costs to cover the theft? What about the investors who sold at a loss because the stock was artificially depressed?" Mara's voice carried a frustration that had been building for weeks. "Everyone acts like getting the money back makes everything okay. It doesn't." Lucas understood that anger. He'd felt it himself, watching wealthy people face consequences that were inconvenient rather than devastating. Burton would go to prison, yes, but he'd already lived well off stolen money. He'd had power and prestige while Mara slept in doorways. "It's not perfect justice," Lucas agreed, "but it's more than most whistleblowers get. You exposed them. You made it stop. That has to count for something." "I guess." Mara sank back into her chair, exhausted. I just thought I'd feel different when it was over, victorious or relieved or something. Instead, I just feel empty. Lucas sat across from her, thinking about his own experiences with hollow victories. The custody battle he'd won by default when Ethan's mother never showed up to court. The jobs he'd kept by accepting lower pay than he deserved. Small wins that felt like losses because of what they'd cost. "Give it time," he said. "Right now, everything is happening too fast. The arrests, the media, the job offers. Your brain hasn't caught up yet, but it will." "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I just know what it's like to survive something hard and wonder why it doesn't feel better." Lucas offered a small smile. "Being a single parent is like that. You make it through the crisis, the sleepless nights, the financial panic, the moments when you think you can't do it, and then you realize surviving isn't the same as thriving. It's just continuing. That's depressing. It's realistic. But here's the thing, continuing is how you get to the better parts. You can't skip the empty feeling. You have to sit with it until it transforms into something else." Mara studied him with an expression that made Lucas uncomfortable in ways he couldn't articulate. "You're a good man, Lucas Reed. I hope you know that." "I'm just doing what anyone should do." "But most people don't. That's the whole point." She reached across the table, touched his hand briefly. "Thank you for believing me when no one else would, for risking everything to help me, for teaching me that not everyone is out for themselves." Lucas felt heat creep up his neck, unused to gratitude this direct. "You would have done the same for me." "I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure I would have had the courage." Before Lucas could respond, his phone rang. Agent Chen. "Mr. Reed, we need to schedule your formal deposition. Standard procedure for federal cases. Are you available tomorrow afternoon?" "I can make it work." Lucas was already calculating which shift he'd need to move. "What should I expect?" "Questions about your interactions with Burton, the threats he made, timeline verification. Nothing adversarial. You're a witness, not a defendant. But we need everything documented for trial." "Will Mara have to testify?" "Extensively. She's the primary witness. But we'll prepare her thoroughly. This isn't her first deposition. We did preliminary statements already." Agent Chen paused. "How is she doing? The media attention can be overwhelming." Lucas glanced at Mara, who was staring out the window at nothing. "She's processing. It's a lot. Tell her she doesn't have to engage with the press. We can arrange a statement if she wants, but there's no obligation. Her job is to be ready for trial testimony, nothing more." After the call ended, Lucas relayed the information. Mara nodded mechanically, still distant. "I think I need to get out of here," she said abruptly. "Away from the phones and the news and the constant reminders. Can we just go somewhere normal?" "Define normal." "I don't know. Grocery shopping? A walk in the park? Something that has nothing to do with federal cases and corporate fraud." She looked at him with desperate hope. "Please?" Lucas thought about his schedule, the deliveries waiting, the money he needed to earn. Then he thought about Mara's face, about what she'd been through, about the fact that normalcy was actually a radical act right now. "Grocery shopping it is," he said. They took his Civic to the Safeway on Hawthorne, the one Lucas usually avoided because it was slightly more expensive than the discount chain across town. But today wasn't about budget optimization. Today was about pretending to be regular people doing regular things. Inside the store, fluorescent lights hummed over produce displays and end cap sales. Mara grabbed a cart and just started walking. No list, no plan. Lucas followed, watching her rediscover the simple pleasure of choosing food. "When was the last time you grocery shopped?" he asked. "Months, before everything fell apart." She picked up an apple, examined it with disproportionate interest. "I used to have routines. Grocery shopping on Sundays, meal prep on Monday nights. I was one of those people who organized their refrigerator and used matching containers." "What happened to all that stuff?" "Your apartment? Landlord probably threw it out when I couldn't pay rent. Or sold it. I don't know." Mara put the apple in the cart, selected 3 more. "I had this fantasy that someday I'd go back, that my things would still be there waiting. Stupid, right?" "Not stupid, human." Lucas added bananas to the cart, the kind Ethan liked. "We all want to believe the world preserves our place when we're forced to leave it." They wandered the aisles in companionable silence. Mara occasionally adding items, fresh bread, cheese, vegetables that required preparation. Things homeless people couldn't have. Small reclamations of dignity. In the pasta aisle, she stopped abruptly. "Lucas, I can't pay for any of this. I don't have money." "I know, I'm buying." "You can't afford to feed me indefinitely. You're already letting me stay at your house, dealing with threats because of me." "Mara," Lucas turned to face her. "I'm buying groceries, not solving world hunger. Let me do this." "But, no buts. You've had everything taken from you. Let someone give something back." He softened his tone. "Besides, Ethan keeps asking when we can have spaghetti again. You're giving me an excuse to buy the good pasta." She smiled despite herself. "The good pasta?" "The kind that costs $4 instead of $2. We're living large today." They continued shopping, Mara gradually relaxing into the mundane pleasure of it. At the deli counter, she ordered sliced turkey and provolone with the careful precision of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to make choices. Lucas watched her, thinking about poverty's erosions, not just of resources, but of agency, the slow theft of the ability to choose. At checkout, the total came to $73, more than Lucas usually spent in a week, but he handed over his card without hesitation. Some things mattered more than budget discipline. "Thank you," Mara said quietly as they loaded bags into the trunk. "Not just for the food, for treating me like a person who deserves normal things." "You do deserve normal things. You've always deserved them." Lucas closed the trunk. "The fact that you've been denied them doesn't change that." They drove back in silence, the car filled with grocery bags and the scent of fresh bread. When they pulled into the driveway, Mrs. Chen was outside tending her garden. She waved, then approached the car. "Lucas, dear, I've been meaning to talk to you." She glanced at Mara. "About your friend here." Lucas felt his defenses rise. "What about her?" "Relax, I'm not prying." Mrs. Chen smiled. "I just wanted to say, you're doing a good thing. I've seen how you've helped her. That takes character." "You don't know the situation, Mrs. Chen." "I know enough. I know a young woman who had nowhere to go found shelter here. I know you've been careful with Ethan, protective and responsible. I know you've gotten some threatening phone calls that you thought I didn't hear through the walls." She patted his arm. "These old houses, Lucas. Sound carries." "I'm sorry if we've worried you." "Don't be sorry. Be proud." Mrs. Chen looked at Mara directly. "And you, dear, I hope you find your feet again. You're welcome here as long as Lucas is willing to have you." After she returned to her garden, Mara turned to Lucas. "She knows about everything?" "Apparently more than I thought." Lucas grabbed grocery bags. Portland's full of surprises. They spent the afternoon cooking together, an impromptu collaboration that filled the small kitchen with good smells and easy conversation. Mara made spaghetti sauce from scratch, while Lucas prepared salad and garlic bread. They moved around each other with the unconscious coordination of people who'd shared space long enough to develop rhythm. "I haven't cooked in so long," Mara said, stirring sauce. "I forgot how therapeutic it is. The measuring, the timing, the transformation of raw ingredients into something nourishing. It's one of the few things I'm actually good at." Lucas sliced tomatoes with more confidence than he brought to most tasks. "When Ethan was a baby and I didn't know what I was doing, cooking was the thing that made me feel competent. I could follow a recipe, I could feed my kid. That was something." "You sell yourself short. You're good at lots of things." "Like what?" "Like listening. Like making people feel safe. Like standing up to powerful men who threaten your family." Mara met his eyes over the stove. "Like being exactly the person someone needs at exactly the right moment." Lucas didn't know how to respond to that, so he focused on the salad. But her words settled somewhere in his chest, warm and unfamiliar. When Ethan burst through the door at 6, he stopped short, inhaling deeply. "Something smells really good." "We made spaghetti," Mara announced. "The fancy kind." "With meatballs?" "With meatballs," Lucas confirmed. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Ethan chattering about his day, Mara asking questions about kindergarten drama, Lucas mediating disputes about whether broccoli counted as a vegetable or a baby tree that shouldn't be mandatory. For 2 hours, they were just 3 people sharing a meal, no federal cases or threats or homelessness. Just pasta and conversation and the ordinary magic of a dinner table. After Ethan was in bed, Lucas and Mara cleaned the kitchen together. She washed, he dried, falling into an easy rhythm. "This feels dangerous," Mara said quietly. "What does?" "This. Domesticity. Normalcy." She handed him a soapy plate. "I'm getting comfortable here, starting to forget that this is temporary, that I need to figure out my own life." "What's wrong with comfortable?" "Nothing, if it's sustainable. But this isn't my house, isn't my life. I'm borrowing your stability while I rebuild mine." Mara paused, hands still in the water. "I don't want to become dependent on your kindness." "Is that what you think you're doing?" "Isn't it? You've given me everything: shelter, safety, belief. What have I given you except problems and threats?" Lucas set down the dish towel, turned to face her. "You've given me plenty. You've reminded me why I work 2 jobs and sacrifice sleep and eat cold leftovers standing at the counter. You've shown Ethan what courage looks like. You've made me believe that doing the right thing actually matters." "Lucas, and you've made me realize how isolated I've been, how much I've narrowed my life to just survival mode. Having you here, it's reminded me that I'm still a person, not just a parent and a paycheck." He caught himself, suddenly aware he was revealing more than he intended. "So no, you haven't just taken. You've given plenty." Mara stared at him, something shifting in her expression. "I think we're in dangerous territory here." "What kind of territory?" "The kind where we start confusing gratitude for something else, where I mistake your kindness for affection, where you mistake my dependence for connection." She pulled her hands from the water, dried them carefully. "I've been homeless for weeks, Lucas, living on the street, desperate for human warmth. You're the first person who's been genuinely kind to me in months. That's a recipe for emotional confusion." Lucas understood what she was saying, recognized the wisdom in it, but he also felt something that went beyond simple charity, something that had started as compassion and transformed into genuine care. "You're right," he said carefully. "We should be careful. Clear boundaries, realistic expectations." "Exactly. But Mara?" He met her eyes. "Just because we need to be careful doesn't mean what we're feeling isn't real. It just means we need to be honest about it." "And what are we feeling?" "I don't know yet, but I know it's not nothing." Lucas picked up the dish towel again, returned to drying. "And I know that when this is over, when you have your own place and your life is stable, I'd like to still know you. As a friend, at minimum, maybe as something more if that's what develops naturally." Mara was quiet for a long moment. "That's very mature of you." "I'm a 34-year-old single father. Maturity is kind of mandatory." He smiled. "But I'm also allowed to acknowledge that having you here has been good for me, that helping you has helped me too." "How?" "By reminding me I'm capable of more than just surviving, that I can actually make a difference in someone's life." Lucas set down the last dish. "You needed help, and I was able to give it. That matters, not just for you, but for me too." They finished cleaning in thoughtful silence, both processing the conversation and what it meant. When the kitchen was spotless, Mara headed for her usual spot on the couch. "Good night, Lucas. And thank you. For today. For everything." "Good night, Mara." Lucas checked on Ethan, sprawled sideways across his bed, one leg hanging off the edge, and returned to his room. Through the open door, he could see Mara settling under her blanket, her phone glowing in the darkness. His own phone buzzed. A message from Agent Chen. "Deposition scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Federal Building, room 407. Bring ID and be prepared for 2 to 3 hours of questioning." Lucas confirmed, then set an alarm for the morning. Tomorrow would bring formal statements, legal processes, the machinery of justice grinding forward. But tonight, he'd made spaghetti with a woman who'd broken into his house and transformed his life. He thought about what Mara had said, about confusing gratitude for affection, about emotional dependency masquerading as connection. She was probably right to be cautious, but Lucas had spent enough years alone to recognize the difference between loneliness seeking any port and genuine human connection. What he felt for Mara was complicated, certainly. Built on unusual circumstances, definitely. But it was also real. He cared about her welfare beyond simple charity. He enjoyed her company beyond obligation. He respected her courage and her honesty and the way she'd chosen integrity over comfort. Whether that was friendship or something more would reveal itself with time. For now, it was enough to know she was safe, that Burton was in custody, that justice was grinding slowly forward. Lucas closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of his house. The refrigerator's hum, the creak of old pipes, the distant sound of rain beginning again. And underneath it all, the quiet breathing of two people who needed him, his son and a stranger who'd become something more. Tomorrow would bring depositions and difficult questions. But tonight, they'd made spaghetti and laughed over dinner and proven that normal life was still possible even in extraordinary circumstances. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The deposition the next day was exactly as tedious as Lucas expected. 3 hours in a windowless room, answering questions about Burton's phone call, about meeting Mara, about his decision to contact the FBI. A court reporter transcribed everything while Agent Chen and 2 other federal prosecutors asked questions designed to establish timeline and credibility. And when Mr. Burton mentioned your son by name, what was your emotional response? One prosecutor asked. Terror, Lucas answered honestly. Rage. The primal fear of a parent who realizes their child might be in danger. But you didn't withdraw your cooperation? No. Why not? Lucas thought about how to articulate what had driven him. Because backing down would have taught my son that powerful people always win, that doing the right thing doesn't matter when it's hard. I couldn't live with that lesson. The prosecutor nodded, made a note. And your relationship with Ms. Collins, purely as a concerned citizen helping someone in need? Yes. No romantic involvement? No. Lucas kept his voice steady. She's someone who needed help. I was in a position to provide it. That's the extent of our relationship. It was technically true, even if it felt incomplete. But deposition rooms weren't places for nuance or emotional complexity. They wanted facts, timelines, legal foundations for prosecution. When it was finally over, Lucas emerged exhausted and slightly nauseous from the fluorescent lights and recycled air. Mara was waiting in the hallway, having completed her own deposition earlier. How did it go? She asked. Fine. Long. They asked about everything. Lucas checked his phone, 4 p.m. He'd missed his afternoon shift entirely. Did they grill you about our relationship? Extensively. They wanted to make sure there wasn't any quid pro quo, that I hadn't offered you anything in exchange for help. Mara smiled tiredly. I told them you were just a good person who made a choice. They seemed disappointed by how boring the truth was. Truth usually is boring. It's lies that require interesting stories. They walked to the parking garage in silence, both drained. In the car, Mara turned to him. Agent Chen told me they've arranged housing, a furnished apartment in Beaverton, paid through the trial. I can move in this weekend. Lucas felt something twist in his chest. Relief that she'd be stable and safe. Yes, but also something else, something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. That's great, he said, meaning it. You'll have your own space again. Yeah, my own space. Mara stared out the window. It's what I need. Time to rebuild without being dependent on anyone. Absolutely. But Lucas? She turned back to him. I'm going to miss your couch, and Ethan's dinosaur obsession, and the way you make coffee in the morning without being fully awake. You'll visit, Lucas said, hoping it was true. Once you're settled, once things calm down. We'll stay in touch. Promise? Promise. They drove home through afternoon traffic, both lost in thought. Change was coming, necessary and healthy, but that didn't make it comfortable. Mara had been part of Lucas's household for less than a week, but her presence had shifted something fundamental, made the house feel less empty, made the daily grind feel less isolating. That evening, Lucas made the announcement to Ethan over dinner. Mara found her own place, buddy. She's going to move out this weekend. Ethan looked up from his chicken nuggets. Why? Did we do something wrong? No, nothing like that. Lucas struggled to explain in 5-year-old terms. Remember how I said she was staying here because she needed help? Well, now she has her own home again, which is good. It means she's okay now. But I like having her here. Ethan's lower lip trembled slightly. She helped me with my cloud project, and she doesn't make me eat all my vegetables. Mara laughed, eyes bright. I definitely made you eat your vegetables, Ethan. You just didn't notice because I hid them in the spaghetti sauce. That's sneaky. It's cooking. She reached over, ruffled his hair. But you're right. I did help with your clouds, and I love doing it. Which is why I'm going to come visit sometimes, if that's okay with your dad. Can she, Dad? Lucas met Mara's eyes over Ethan's head. Absolutely. Anytime she wants. The rest of the week passed in a strange limbo of preparation and avoidance. Mara organized the few belongings she had, accepted donations of basic household items from Mrs. Chen, prepared for a life that was hers again. Lucas helped where he could, driving her to pick up essentials, offering furniture he didn't need. They didn't talk about what came after, about whether their relationship would survive the transition from crisis to normalcy, whether friendship forged in extraordinary circumstances could translate to ordinary life. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool, typical Portland autumn. The FBI had arranged for movers to take donated furniture to Mara's new apartment, a small one-bedroom in a complex that looked clean and safe, if not particularly inspiring. Lucas and Ethan helped her unpack boxes, arrange furniture, make the space feel like home. Ethan insisted on helping organize the kitchen, lining up canned goods with serious concentration. There, he announced when the pantry met his standards. Now you can find everything. It's perfect, Mara said seriously. Thank you, Ethan. You're an excellent organizer. By afternoon, the apartment was functional, if sparse. Mara stood in the living room, surveying her new domain with an expression Lucas couldn't read. It's really mine, she said quietly. My name on the lease, my key, my space. How does it feel? Strange. Good strange, but strange. She turned to him. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I can't stay, that it's a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's what you earned. Lucas meant it. You stood up to corruption, cooperated with federal investigators, survived threats and homelessness. This is your reward. Some reward, a basic apartment and the prospect of testifying against men who want me dead. Better than sleeping in doorways. Significantly better than that, Mara agreed. She looked at Ethan, who was examining her empty bookshelves. Thank you both. For everything. I literally wouldn't be here without you. We know, Ethan said matter-of-factly. Dad says we helped save your life. That's pretty cool. It's very cool, Mara confirmed, voice thick with emotion. When it was time to leave, Mara walked them to the door. She hugged Ethan first, fierce and grateful. You're a special kid, you know that? Don't ever stop being kind. I won't, Ethan promised. Then she turned to Lucas. The hug lasted longer, neither of them quite ready to let go. I'll call you, she whispered. I promise I'll stay in touch. You better. Lucas pulled back, meeting her eyes. We're in this together, remember? Partners in federal witness protection. The worst club ever. But exclusive. He smiled, trying to keep things light even as his chest ached. Take care of yourself, Mara. You deserve good things. So do you, Lucas Reed. Don't forget that. Driving home, Ethan was uncharacteristically quiet. Lucas glanced at him in the rearview mirror. You okay, buddy? I'm sad Mara's gone, but also happy she has her own house now. Ethan kicked his feet against the car seat. Is that weird? Being sad and happy at the same time? Not weird at all. That's called bittersweet. It's a very grown-up feeling. Lucas navigated familiar streets, thinking about his own bittersweet emotions. It means you care about someone enough to miss them, but you also want what's best for them even if it makes you sad. Oh, Ethan processed this. Then I feel bittersweet about Mara. Me too, buddy. Me too. That night, the house felt emptier than it had in months. The couch was just a couch again, not someone's temporary bed. The kitchen was quiet without Mara's morning coffee routine. Even the air felt different, less charged with the tension of borrowed time and uncertain futures. Lucas checked his phone compulsively, waiting for a text that didn't come. She was settling in, he told himself, getting used to her own space, She'd reach out when she was ready. But as the days passed and silence stretched between them, Lucas began to wonder if maybe Mara had needed a clean break, if maintaining contact was too complicated, too emotionally fraught, if it was easier for her to start fresh without the reminder of how desperate she'd once been. He tried not to take it personally, tried to focus on work and Ethan and the simple fact that he'd done a good thing. That Mara was safe and Burton was awaiting trial and justice was happening. But late at night, lying awake in the darkness, Lucas couldn't help feeling like he'd lost something important, something he hadn't fully appreciated until it was gone. The silence lasted 3 weeks. 21 days of Lucas going through the motions, working his shifts, making dinners, helping Ethan with homework. 21 days of checking his phone and finding nothing. 21 days of telling himself it was fine, that Mara needed space, that their connection had been circumstantial and temporary. 21 days of feeling the absence like a missing tooth his tongue kept finding. "Dad, you're making sad pancakes again," Ethan announced one Sunday morning, poking at his breakfast with suspicion. "What makes a pancake sad?" "When you forget the chocolate chips and make them all flat because you're thinking about other stuff." Ethan was too perceptive for 5. "Are you thinking about Mara?" Lucas flipped another pancake, avoiding his son's eyes. "What makes you think that?" "Because you check your phone all the time like you're waiting for someone to call, and Mrs. Chen asked if you two had a fight because you seem mopey." Ethan took a bite of sad pancake, chewed thoughtfully. "I miss her too. She was nice." "She is nice," Lucas corrected. Present tense. "She's just busy with her own life now." "Too busy to say hi?" That was the question, wasn't it? Too busy or too intentional? Lucas didn't know which answer he preferred. His phone buzzed. For a moment his heart leapt, but it was just Agent Chen calling about trial scheduling. "Mr. Reed wanted to update you on the case. Burton's lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal. If it goes through, you and Ms. Collins might not have to testify." "Is that good news?" "Mixed. It means less stress for you both, but it also means Burton might get a lighter sentence." Agent Chen paused. "How's Mara doing? I've been trying to reach her about the plea negotiations, but she's not returning calls." Lucas felt ice form in his stomach. "What do you mean she's not returning calls?" "Just that. I've left messages, sent emails. Radio silence for over a week now." The agent's tone shifted to concern. "You two are in touch, right? You'd know if something was wrong?" "I haven't talked to her since she moved out," Lucas admitted. "I assumed she was just settling in." A week of not responding to the FBI is more than settling in. That's avoidance. Agent Chen was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Reed, I need you to check on her. Make sure she's okay. The trial is in 6 weeks, and I need to know my star witness is stable." After hanging up, Lucas stood in his kitchen, debating. He didn't want to intrude on Mara's new life, didn't want to seem needy or clingy. But if the FBI couldn't reach her, if something was actually wrong— "We're going for a drive," he announced to Ethan. "Where?" "To check on a friend." The apartment complex in Beaverton looked exactly as it had 3 weeks ago. Neutral, functional, impersonal. Lucas found Mara's unit on the 2nd floor and knocked, Ethan standing beside him with the unquestioning faith of a child who believed his father knew what he was doing. No answer. Lucas knocked again, harder. "Mara, it's Lucas. Agent Chen is worried about you." Still nothing. He tried the doorknob, locked, pressed his ear to the door and heard nothing but silence. "Maybe she went somewhere," Ethan suggested. "Maybe." But Lucas felt wrong about this. A crawling sensation between his shoulder blades that said something wasn't right. He was debating whether to call building management when the door across the hall opened. A woman in her 60s peered out, curious and cautious. "You looking for the girl in 2B? "Yes, ma'am. I'm a friend. Have you seen her?" The woman stepped into the hallway, wrapping a cardigan around herself. "Saw her last week, briefly. She looked awful, if I'm being honest. Pale, jumpy. Asked me if I'd seen anyone hanging around her door." Lucas's concern crystallized into fear. "Did you see anyone?" "No, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. I'm not watching all the time." She studied Lucas with shrewd eyes. "You really her friend? Or are you one of the people she was worried about?" "I'm her friend. I helped her when she was in trouble." Lucas pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of the three of them from moving day. Him, Mara, and Ethan arranging her kitchen. See? I'm trying to help her now, too. The woman's expression softened. She hasn't been out in days. I know because her newspapers are piling up. She pointed to Mara's doorstep, where 3 days' worth of local papers sat untouched. I was about to call the manager myself. Can you do that now? Tell them it's an emergency wellness check? 10 minutes later, a harried property manager arrived with master keys, muttering about liability and proper procedures. Lucas let the man's complaints wash over him, focused entirely on what they'd find behind that door. The manager knocked officially, announced himself, got no response. Finally, he unlocked the door and pushed it open. Ms. Collins, property management, we're coming in. The apartment was dark, curtains drawn against afternoon light. It took Lucas's eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, his heart sank. The space was a disaster. Furniture pushed against the door, dishes piled in the sink, trash overflowing. And in the corner, curled on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her, was Mara. She looked up when they entered, eyes hollow and exhausted. Lucas? Jesus, Mara. He crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside the couch. What happened? Are you hurt? I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like you haven't slept in days. Lucas glanced at the furniture barricade. Are you safe here? Is someone threatening you? No, maybe. I don't know. Mara's voice was flat, disconnected. I keep seeing cars outside. Men in the parking lot who might be watching or might just be residents. I can't tell anymore what's real and what's paranoia. The property manager cleared his throat. Should I call someone? Police? An ambulance? Give us a minute, Lucas said. To Ethan, who was hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Buddy, can you wait in the hallway with the nice manager? I need to talk to Mara alone. Is she sick? She's struggling, but we're going to help her, okay? After they left, Lucas sat on the edge of the couch, giving Mara space but staying close enough to reach her. Talk to me. What's really going on? I can't do this. Mara's voice cracked. I thought I could. Thought I could live alone, be normal, wait for the trial like it was just another appointment, but I can't. Every noise is a threat. Every stranger is Burton's man coming to finish the job. I'm falling apart and I don't know how to stop. Lucas understood then. She wasn't avoiding him or the FBI. She was drowning, pulled under by trauma and isolation and the delayed reaction to everything she'd survived. You're having panic attacks, he said gently. What you're describing, the hypervigilance, the paranoia, the inability to function, those are symptoms of trauma. I know what they are. Knowing doesn't make them stop. Mara pulled the blanket tighter. I was doing okay when I was at your place. Busy, focused on the case, not alone with my thoughts. But here, by myself, all I can think about is everything that happened. Everything that could still happen. Why didn't you call me? Because I didn't want to be that person. The broken one who can't handle being alone. The charity case who keeps needing rescue. She wiped at her eyes with the blanket. You already did so much. I couldn't ask for more. Mara, listen to me. Lucas waited until she met his eyes. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's survival. And you're not a charity case. You're someone dealing with a legitimate trauma response to a terrifying situation. I'm supposed to be the strong whistleblower. The brave woman who stood up to corruption. Her laugh was bitter. Instead, I'm hiding in a dark apartment, too scared to check my mail. You are brave. Bravery doesn't mean you don't struggle. It means you keep going even when you're struggling. Lucas stood, started opening curtains. Light flooded in, making Mara flinch. And right now, keeping going means accepting that you need support. I have a therapist. The FBI arranged it. I've been twice. That's good. But therapy once a week doesn't solve the other 6 days when you're alone and spiraling. Lucas assessed the apartment with a practical eye. When's the last time you ate a real meal? I don't know. Yesterday? 2 days ago? Okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make you something to eat while you take a shower. Then we're going to talk about actually solving this instead of just surviving it. Lucas, no arguments. You helped me once by being honest about what you needed. I'm helping you now by insisting you accept help. It took convincing, but eventually Mara agreed. While she showered, Lucas enlisted Ethan's help cleaning the kitchen, making sandwiches, restoring basic order. The property manager had left, satisfied that no one was dead or in immediate danger, but the neighbor from across the hall appeared with a casserole. "Made extra," she said simply. "Your friend looks like she could use some proper food." By the time Mara emerged, clean and slightly more human, there was food on the table and sunshine in the apartment. She sat slowly, like someone not quite sure they deserved comfort. "Eat," Lucas instructed. "Then we talk." She ate mechanically, clearly not tasting anything but getting calories down. Ethan chattered about his upcoming science fair, filling the silence with innocent enthusiasm that seemed to anchor Mara back to reality. When the meal was finished, Lucas sent Ethan to play on his tablet in the bedroom and turned to Mara seriously. "You can't stay here alone. Not in the state you're in." "I don't have anywhere else to go." "Yes, you do. You come back to my place." Before she could protest, "Temporarily, just until the trial is over and you're more stable. Then we reassess." "Lucas, I can't impose on you again. It's not an imposition. It's a practical solution to a real problem." He leaned forward. "Look, I get it. You wanted independence, wanted to prove you could handle things alone. But there's no shame in admitting that right now, alone is too hard, that you need to be around people who care about you." "What about your life, your work?" "Ethan, my life is fine. Work is work. And Ethan already asked me twice this week when you were coming to visit." Lucas softened his tone. "Besides, having you there was good for us too. Made the house feel less empty, made me feel less isolated." Mara studied him, searching for pity or obligation. What she found instead was genuine care and concern. "Just until the trial," she said finally. "Then I figure out something sustainable." "Deal." They packed her essentials, which wasn't much since she hadn't accumulated many possessions, and drove back to Lucas's house. Mrs. Chen watched from her window, and Lucas could swear he saw her smile. That evening, after Ethan was asleep, Lucas and Mara sat on opposite ends of the couch, the familiar configuration from weeks before. "I'm sorry," Mara said quietly, "for disappearing, for falling apart, for making you rescue me again." "Stop apologizing for being human." Lucas poured them both tea, an evening ritual they'd developed before. "You went through trauma. You're dealing with PTSD symptoms. That's not a character flaw. Feels like one. It's not. It's just your brain trying to protect you from perceived threats. The problem is it's overprotective right now, seeing danger everywhere." Lucas handed her a mug. "But that gets better with time and support, which you now have." "Do you ever get tired of being the strong one?" Mara asked. "Of being everyone's support system?" "Every day. But that's parenting. You don't get to fall apart because someone else needs you." He sipped his tea. "Though having you here helped with that. Reminded me I'm allowed to be human too." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who've weathered storms together. Outside, Portland rain began again, gentle and cleansing. "Agent Chen called me," Mara said eventually. "Left a message about plea deal negotiations. I couldn't bring myself to call back. She's worried about you, so am I apparently, since she asked me to check on you. I'll call her tomorrow, face whatever comes next." Mara set down her tea. "I just needed to remember I wasn't alone first." "You're not alone. Even when I'm annoying you with my hovering and insisting you eat vegetables, you're not alone." Despite everything, Mara smiled. "You do hover." "Occupational hazard of single parenting. It's my default setting." The next morning, Mara called Agent Chen and explained what had happened. The agent listened without judgment, then arranged for additional therapy sessions and a consultation with a trauma specialist. She also shared updates on the plea deal. Burton's lawyers want to reduce charges in exchange for cooperation on a larger investigation. If we accept, he'd serve 8 to 10 years instead of 20 to 30. Agent Chen's voice was carefully neutral. "I need to know if you can live with that, Ms. Collins." Mara looked at Lucas, who was making breakfast and pretending not to eavesdrop. She thought about justice and revenge, about Burton in prison for a decade versus 3, about what she actually needed to heal. "Will the stolen money be returned?" she asked. "Already in process. full restitution to Tech Vision and the defrauded investors. And my record? The false accusations he made? Completely cleared. We're preparing a formal statement exonerating you of all allegations. Agent Chen paused. You're being offered your job back at triple your previous salary, by the way. The board wants to make amends. Mara thought about that corner office, about proving she could go back and succeed. She also thought about never wanting to see that building again. Tell them I declined the job offer, but I'll accept the plea deal on one condition. What's that? Burton has to publicly admit what he did. Not through lawyers, not through carefully worded statements. I want him to stand in court and say out loud that he stole millions, that he framed me, that he threatened witnesses. I want the truth on record. I think we can arrange that. Agent Chen sounded satisfied. Anything else? Yeah, I want to work with your office on developing better protections for corporate whistleblowers, programs to support people who come forward so they don't end up homeless and traumatized. Mara's voice gained strength as she spoke. If I went through this, others have too. Let's make it easier for the next person. I'd like that very much. Let me talk to my supervisors about setting something up. After the call ended, Mara sat with the phone in her hands, processing. Lucas brought her coffee and toast, set them down without comment. I turned down the job, she said. Good. You don't think I should have taken it? Proved I could go back? I think you should do what serves your healing, not what proves a point to people who don't matter. Lucas sat across from her. What do you actually want, Mara? Not what you think you should want. What feels right for you? She considered that carefully. I want to help people. Use what I learned, the hard way, to make the system better. I want to wake up and feel like I'm doing meaningful work, not just collecting a paycheck. Then that's what you do. Even if it means starting over, building a career from scratch at 30? Especially then. Life's too short to spend it proving things to people who've already shown they don't deserve your effort. Lucas smiled. Besides, 30 is young. You've got decades to build something meaningful. Over the following weeks, Mara stabilized. The nightmares didn't disappear, but they lessened. The hypervigilance remained but became manageable. She attended therapy religiously, worked with Agent Chen on whistleblower protection programs, slowly rebuilt confidence in herself and the world. And through it all, she lived in Lucas's house, integrated into their small family in ways that felt both natural and profound. She helped Ethan with his homework, teaching him about clouds and weather patterns with the patience of someone who needed to focus on simple, beautiful things. She cooked dinners with Lucas, their kitchen choreography refined to the point where they moved around each other without conscious thought. She even won over Mrs. Chen completely, the two of them sharing tea and discussing gardening while Lucas worked his shifts. You know people are going to talk, Mara said one evening, folding laundry while Lucas washed dishes. About us living together. About what our relationship is. Let them talk. People have been making assumptions about my life since I became a single father. Lucas dried a plate, added it to the stack. Besides, what we are is actually pretty simple. We're friends. Partners in surviving impossible situations. Family by choice. Is that all we are? Lucas paused, considering. They'd been carefully dancing around this question for weeks, maintaining boundaries even as those boundaries felt increasingly artificial. I don't know, he said honestly. I know I care about you. I know having you here feels right. I know that when you moved out the first time, the house felt empty in ways it hadn't before. He set down the dish towel. But I also know we met under extreme circumstances, that you were vulnerable and I was helpful, and those aren't necessarily foundations for romance. So we're being sensible and cautious, Mara said. We're being honest and patient. Lucas met her eyes, letting things develop naturally instead of forcing something because we think we should feel a certain way. That's very mature. I'm a father. Maturity is mandatory. He smiled. But Mara, when the trial is over and you're stable and we've had time to just be normal people around each other, I'd like to explore what this could be, if you're interested. I'm interested, she admitted. Terrified, but interested. Good. Terrified but interested is a solid foundation for anything worth building. The trial date arrived in late November, Portland gray and drizzling, as always. Lucas took the day off work, arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch Ethan, and accompanied Mara to the courthouse. She wore a professional suit purchased for the occasion, armor against the exposure of testifying. but her hands shook as they climbed the courthouse steps. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can, because you've already survived worse." Lucas squeezed her hand briefly. "And because I'm going to be right there in the gallery, watching you be brave." The courtroom was exactly as intimidating as expected, wood paneling and high ceilings, and the weight of institutional justice. Burton sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking smaller than Lucas remembered from the phone call. Not the bogeyman of nightmares, just a middle-aged man facing consequences. When called to testify, Mara walked to the stand with her head high. Lucas watched her swear to tell the truth, watched her face Burton directly, watched her refuse to be intimidated by the man who tried to destroy her. The prosecutor led her through the story methodically. The discovery of the fraud, the confrontation, the firing, the threats, the homelessness. Mara answered each question clearly, her voice steady even when discussing the worst parts. Then came the moment they'd negotiated. Burton's lawyer stood. "Mr. Burton, as part of the plea agreement, you have a statement to make to the court. Please proceed." Burton stood slowly, looking at Mara directly for the first time. Lucas saw her tense, saw her force herself to maintain eye contact. "I stole $18 million from Tech Vision Solutions over 3 years, Burton said, his voice formal and stripped of the charm he'd used on the phone. "I created false vendor accounts, approved fraudulent contracts, and hid the theft through systematic manipulation of financial records. When Ms. Collins discovered what I was doing, I fired her under false pretenses, destroyed her professional reputation, and had her threatened with physical harm if she reported what she knew." He paused, something flickering in his expression. Shame, maybe, or just the resignation of a man who knew he was beaten. Ms. Collins did nothing wrong. She acted with integrity and courage. Everything that happened to her was my fault, and I accept full responsibility for the harm I caused. The courtroom was silent. Mara sat very still, absorbing the public acknowledgement she'd fought so hard to achieve. The judge spoke then, his voice carrying the weight of years on the bench. "Mr. Burton, pursuant to your plea agreement, this court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. You will also be required to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into corporate fraud." He looked at Mara. "Ms. Collins, on behalf of this court, I want to acknowledge your courage in coming forward. Without whistleblowers like you, corporate crime would go unpunished. Thank you for your service to justice." And just like that, it was over. Burton was led away in handcuffs. The gallery erupted in quiet conversation. Mara sat frozen in the witness box until Lucas appeared beside her. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. Agent Chen ran interference, giving a brief statement while Lucas guided Mara to his car. They drove in silence, the weight of completion settling over them both. "How do you feel?" Lucas asked finally. "Empty. Relieved. Angry that he only got 10 years. Mara stared out the window. But also satisfied that at least he got something, that he had to admit the truth publicly. "You did it. Everything you set out to do. We did it. I couldn't have gotten here without you." Lucas pulled into his driveway, killed the engine. Before getting out, he turned to face her. "What happens now?" "Now I figure out what the rest of my life looks like." Mara unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't move to exit. "Agent Chen offered me a consulting position, working with the FBI on whistleblower protection programs. It's part-time, flexible, actually meaningful." "That's perfect for you." "Yeah, it is." She paused. "But it also means I could actually afford my own place again. Get out of your hair, let you have your life back." "Is that what you want?" "I don't know. What do you want?" Lucas thought about the past months. About Mara in his bathroom, soaking wet and desperate. About Burton's threats and federal depositions and late-night conversations on this couch. About how his house had transformed from a place he survived into a place he actually lived. "I want you to stay," he said quietly. "Not because you need to, but because I want you to. Because having you here makes my life better in ways that have nothing to do with charity or crisis. Lucas, I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend or make any big declarations. I'm just saying, stay. Let's see what happens when we're not in survival mode. When we're just two people building a life together because we want to, not because we have to. Mara was quiet for a long moment. That's terrifying. I know. And wonderful. I know that too. She reached across the console, took his hand. Okay, I'll stay. We'll try this. Build something real instead of just surviving. Inside the house, Mrs. Chen had Ethan ready with construction paper and markers. We made a welcome home sign, Ethan announced, because Mara's trial is over and now she can just live here for real. The sign was enthusiastically decorated with dinosaurs and clouds and stick figures that were presumably the three of them. Lucas felt something in his chest expand, watching his son's uncomplicated joy at their makeshift family. It's perfect, Mara said, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Ethan. That night, after Ethan was asleep and the house had settled into its familiar rhythms, Lucas and Mara sat on the couch that had been her bed and her refuge and her anchor. So we're really doing this, Mara said, building a life together. Slowly, carefully, without pressure or expectations beyond what feels right. Lucas shifted slightly closer. And Mara? If at any point this stops working for you, if you need space or independence or just something different, we figure that out together. No guilt, no obligation. Same goes for you if you wake up and realize you've taken on too much. If you need your space back, then we communicate like adults and figure it out. Lucas smiled. Look at us, being emotionally healthy. It's very boring compared to breaking into bathrooms and federal investigations. Boring is underrated. Boring is sustainable. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. Besides, we can have adventures that don't involve corporate fraud and witness intimidation. Like what? Like figuring out how to explain to Ethan that you're not just a friend anymore. Like deciding whose turn it is to do dishes without a schedule. Like navigating holidays and family dynamics and all the mundane complications of actual relationships. Those don't sound boring at all, Mara observed. Okay, they're terrifying, but they're the right kind of terrifying. Lucas squeezed her hand. The kind that means you're building something real. Outside, Portland rain continued its eternal drumming. Inside, two people who'd found each other through desperation and chance sat together, contemplating a future that looked nothing like what either had imagined. Lucas thought about the stranger in his bathroom, about the choice he'd made to help instead of calling the police, about how one decision had cascaded into federal investigations and threats and terror, but also into this, into partnership and family and the possibility of love built on foundations of shared trauma and genuine care. Thank you, Mara said quietly. Not just for tonight or for the trial, for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing me when no one else would, for teaching me that asking for help isn't weakness. Thank you for trusting me with your truth, for showing Ethan what courage looks like, for making my small, controlled life into something bigger and messier and infinitely more meaningful. They sat in the comfortable silence of people who'd earned the right to exist together without constant words. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Integrating their lives more permanently, defining what they were to each other, navigating the ordinary complications of chosen family. But tonight, they'd survived the storm together, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Months later, as spring transformed Portland from gray to green, Lucas would watch Mara speak at a conference on corporate whistleblowing. She'd tell her story without flinching, talk about homelessness and trauma and survival, and offer hope to others facing similar battles. And he'd feel fierce pride in how far she'd come from that desperate woman in his bathroom. Ethan would finish first grade, his science project about clouds earning him a ribbon, and his new understanding of family earning him maturity beyond his years. He'd introduce Mara as my dad's partner, with the casual confidence of a child who'd never questioned that families came in all configurations. And Lucas would wake up one morning to find Mara making coffee in their kitchen, no longer his kitchen, but theirs, and realize that the life he'd built from survival and single parenthood had transformed into something he'd never imagined, something whole and healthy and chosen. The case against Burton's associates would continue for years, spinning out into larger investigations of corporate fraud. Mara would consult on dozens of cases, helping other whistleblowers navigate the system she'd nearly been destroyed by. Some nights she'd come home exhausted and traumatized by others' stories. But she'd also come home to Lucas and Ethan, to dinner table conversations and homework help, and the ordinary magic of being part of something larger than herself. They'd never officially defined their relationship beyond partners, finding that the labels mattered less than the reality they'd built. Not quite a traditional romance, not exactly a friendship, but something deeper, forged in crisis and sustained by choice. Mrs. Chen would continue to pretend she didn't notice when Mara stopped sleeping on the couch, when one bedroom became two bedrooms again with different occupants. She'd simply make extra casseroles and offer knowing smiles and tell anyone who'd listen about the lovely young family next door. And on rainy nights, when the past threatened to resurface, when Mara woke from nightmares, or Lucas spiraled into anxiety about money, or Ethan asked questions about his mother who'd left, they'd gather in the living room where it all started. Three people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances, building a family from courage and compassion and the simple act of refusing to look away when someone needed help. The story that began with a stranger in a bathroom ended with a family around a dinner table. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real and chosen and fiercely protected. Lucas Reed had thought the hardest part of being a single father was the double shifts and sleepless nights. He'd been wrong. The hardest part was learning to open your life to others, to risk the careful control you'd built, to choose compassion over safety. But it was also the best part. Because on the other side of that risk was this: Mara laughing at Ethan's jokes, Sunday pancakes with chocolate chips, a life that felt full instead of just functional, connection instead of isolation, partnership instead of loneliness, justice for the powerful who'd stolen and lied, home for the vulnerable who'd survived, and love, messy and complicated and absolutely real, for three people who'd found each other in the storm and chosen to build something beautiful in its aftermath. That was worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. That was worth everything.